Hi, good morning. Thanks for joining us so early. We're going to get started. We're going to try and be very timely today. We want to get everything in before we have to leave the museum today. So I want to thank you all for joining us. Thank the museum for allowing us for the second year to have this event in this location. It's such a great location. And first off, to do our welcome this morning, I would like to bring up Maria Sanchez Tucker, the Deputy Director of the New Mexico History Museum, to welcome you and tell you a little bit about what's going on at the museum now.
Thank you, Melanie. On behalf of the New Mexico Department of Cultural Affairs and the New Mexico History Museum, I'm really pleased to welcome you on behalf of the museum here to this wonderful symposium. We are so excited to welcome you to our newly updated auditorium as a venue for these important discussions about preservation and how it intersects with our community. So thank you for being here. I know you're all not strangers to the museum, and you know that we have so many things going on. But I just wanted to tell you a little bit about a couple of the new exhibits that we have in the Palace of Governors. We have A Question of Power. It's a chronicle of some Dene women leaders who fought the construction of a power plant, and it's a fascinating story that was documented. And then also printed at the Palace. You won't want to miss that exhibit because it showcases books and prints and broadsides that were printed during from the 1970s on in the Palace Press. So feel free to look around the museum. We welcome you. We thank you for being here, and we're pleased to be a co-sponsor and to provide the venue for this important summit. So thank you so much.
I'll go ahead and do one logistical request right now and have everyone just silence your cell phones. And I also want to say the museum has wanted us to really emphasize that there's no food and drink in here. You're allowed to have water, but that's it. So just to wrap up, even after lunch, don't bring your leftovers in, they've requested. And if there's anything else, if anyone can't hear at the back or something, maybe just come let us know. Or you can also mention it maybe to Randall up in the AV booth. And we're happy to try and work on that or get our speakers to speak a little more closer to the mic. And now I would like to welcome Mayor Michael Garcia. We're pleased to have him here to speak to you a little bit today.
Well, thank you for the warm introduction, and it's great to see so many folks here. This is such an important topic. And it's also good to see former colleagues like Maria. I miss working with you, but also great the opportunity to work with you in a different capacity. One exhibit she didn't mention that I definitely want to make sure you all are aware of is the exhibit that will feature the obelisk portion of the Soldiers' Monument will be exhibited here at the History Museum here in the seeable future. So once all those details are finalized, we'll make sure to get that out to the public because we know folks are eagerly anticipating what the future of that monument holds for our community. So much to come on that. I'm thankful that we've got so many partners. Just looking at that list of partners, that is a true example of collaboration. And that has been a focal point of at least our administration these past 5 months. There's so much work that needs to happen, whether it's in historic preservation or homelessness or affordable housing or just even business and economic development. Working together makes us stronger. And I think it's exhibited by today's turnout. And so I'm thankful that this is the second event, and we'll look forward to the third and fourth and following, because there's a lot of work in this very, very important topic. Historic preservation is becoming a very unfortunately, some somewhat polarizing conversation right now in our community. I'll kind of address the elephant in the room, so to speak. I'm not somebody who believes that we need to do away with the Historic Preservation Board. I'm somebody who wants to embrace our history, wants to continue our legacy, but also wants to look forward and embrace progress and sustainability and the issues that are impacting our community at this moment in time. I look back and I'm thankful that some of the work, whether it's through my ancestors that have lived here in Santa Fe for centuries, or some of the recent professionals, such as John Gamim, their work is being honored, preserved, and continued. What I do want to ensure, though, is that we are working towards a sustainable future. I look at it through the context of, some of the, especially when we're talking about the historic district, I'm truly thankful that the traditions that were utilized for millennia, folks are fighting to preserve. Little do folks know those were sustainable practices. When you look at utilizing Adobe, folks might not immediately think sustainable. For those folks that live in an Adobe home, your home is sustainable in the sense it's energy efficient. It's cool in the winter. Cool in the summer, warm in the winter. Sorry, didn't have enough coffee this morning. But it's one of those things where folks were utilizing the resources that were available to them in a manner that was sustainable. And I want to ensure that we're continuing those practices. But on the flip side, I want to make sure that we're not being prohibitive either. As we work towards whether it is updating policies, updating laws, we're doing so to meet both merits, preserving our history, but working towards a future that is holistically embracing. And we're starting to see some of that with the Chapter 14 update, the first one that happened, which promotes densification, denser building. And it's a tradition that has been in our community since inception. I look at it from whether it's from our indigenous ancestors, they built densely. Whether it is from folks that moved here after and developed compounds, they built densely. And so we should not be afraid of that type of progress and still embracing the past. So with that being said, I want to invite you and encourage you to participate as we move forward with major updates to our Chapter 14 land code, as well as our general plan, because that is what's going to shape our future. We need your input. We need your vision. And most importantly, we need the historical success you have brought to the table. Because again, if we don't work towards protecting and preserving while embracing progress, we're going to set ourselves up for failure. We are ultimately going to become a community where not everybody has an opportunity to participate. Not everybody has an opportunity to continue to live in their home. And that's at least the priority of my administration, is to ensure that folks can continue to call this place home. So with that, I look forward to a very, very engaging discussion today. I know this is just a very snippet. It's 8 hours, seems long, but this is a very short part of a longer conversation that we as a community need to have. And I'm thankful for engaging folks, bringing folks together, and I'm excited to see what comes of this. So thank you, and good luck, everybody, today. Thank you for having me.
Very exciting. So I did go, not that we don't want you here just because you're the mayor as well, but I did go to the inauguration, and there were a lot of things that Mayor Garcia said, which just as everyone here, we may or may not agree with everything everyone says, and that's why we're all together, so that we can talk about some of these issues. But most definitely, there were some topics about city and county communications and transparency within the administration that really resonated with me. So I really wanted to make sure that we had you here to speak, not just as the mayor and a figurehead for our community, but also to discuss some of your policies and your thoughts, especially in regards to preservation and housing in Santa Fe. So thank you very much for coming today. The mayor may stick around for a little while, but I know there's a lot of events today. On the Saturday, he does have to go and meet and greet lots of people. So. But he does have open hours, I think, quite often. So if anyone wants to speak with the mayor, you could set up a time to speak with him. We'll go back over the logistics too, just water in the space and silence your cell phones. I want to thank a lot of our sponsors here too. Clearstead Avalon, I think there might be someone here from Clearstead. I don't know if Dan is here or not. Oh, there's Dan, yay, thank you. They were early adopters in supporting the organization this year with a big grant. The City of Economic Development, who's incredibly active. Johanna, I don't think she's here, but I think we do have a couple of people, Liz maybe and Casey, maybe, oh, is that Liz and Casey? So we're grateful to, they're doing a lot of funding, of programming around the city. They gave us a grant towards the symposium today. And then Cornerstones is always continually supporting us. They'll be doing their preservation symposium next year. I believe it's in Albuquerque, the Preserve New Mexico. And of course the museum. We're so grateful to be able to use this space. And Miguel De Silva and Ray Landy also supported us as sponsors. And we're very grateful of all of our partners, many of whom are on the panels today. And if just by chance, if you're AIA Santa Fe, just make sure you sign in. I think there's a sign-in sheet because you do get credit. Tom Spray's down here nodding. So if you want to get your educational credit today, which thank you so much for offering that to all of the architects. I tried to get it with the realtors, the Realtor Association, but I started a little too late because it'd be great to have many more of them here too. And so another thing I want to say is, once again, emphasizing that we may not all agree on things that are going to be said today, but just as the mayor was saying, we need to try to figure out how to embrace preservation while looking towards the future. And to do that, we all have to communicate and we have to collaborate. So that said, today I'm asking you all, you don't have to be nice, but be kind. Be thoughtful, be constructive, and be concise, maybe, in your questions to the panel. So the format of it today is that we'll have a moderator for each of the panels. The moderator will lead the conversation. The moderator will probably give a little short presentation. All of them, I think, have something planned. And then we'll have each presenter, each panelist present a little bit about their projects, maybe their life, whatever they choose to do, a lot of stuff about Santa Fe. And then it'll be opened up to discussion amongst the panel led by the moderator. And then ideally, I'm up here with a piece of paper that gives them a little timer, so all the heads of our panels, I'll let you know when you're about 10 minutes in, 5 minutes towards question time. And we're hoping to reserve about 10 minutes of question time, Q&A at the end. And then if we don't need it, if we don't have audience questions, there may be a little additional dialogue amongst the panels, because I've attended these Zooms so far, and everyone is engaging so much. And I think that what we've built here is just going to be incredible. And then the idea of the Santa Fe Continuum. I'm going to speak after lunch. I'll be your afternoon speaker. Aren't you all so excited? I hope it's good. I tried it a couple of times. But this idea of the Santa Fe Continuum, last year we did the symposium. We had many preservationists who were here, different preservation organizations, and talked about preservation within the state, mostly in Santa Fe, but also we had the SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, here and discussing what they did. And out of that came some of these broader ideas and different discussions that I've been having over the last year with a lot of different voices. And it seemed like we could use the established symposium as an opportunity to bring a lot of these voices together, discuss some of these issues. And you may be asking yourself, why Historic Santa Fe Foundation? Well, I'm afraid you'll have to come back after lunch to find out the answer to that question if you don't know already. And then we have a lunch break, and lunch is on your own, so the lunch break is on the calendar. You're welcome. I'd love for you all to attend all day if you can, but you're welcome to pop in and out of panels that you're interested in. Lunch break is on your own, and then we'll come back and convene here. The schedule, I don't have it committed, but the schedule is on your program so that you can see what time you need to come back. And let me see if there's other things I want to say. I'm not sure if there are. And maybe we can get settled in a little bit early over here. I think I've got most of the things that I need to discuss right now. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yes, an important question. Yeah. Okay, the restroom's up the stairs to the left, and then there's also one by the gift shop as well. Any other logistical announcements? Okay, and then we'll have 10-minute breaks between each panel. We'll be going through the slides, so you're welcome to go to the restroom at that point, step outside for a few moments. I think you might all have bands, but I don't know if they'll stop you, but just tell them you're here for the symposium at the front door. 2 quick questions. Yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry. I should have mentioned that earlier, and I did have that on my notes. Just so you all know, we're going to be passing around the mic for the Q&A. If you don't want to be recorded, you could probably hold it away, but we would greatly appreciate that you would hold the mic close to your mouth, as well as all of our panelists here get in there, and ask your questions at that point. If you want to be identified, you're welcome to identify yourself. If you want to ask the question anonymously, you're welcome to. And we will share this later on, so we're hoping to share it much more broadly, because I think it is an important discussion that we would like to have out in the world. But so it's good, but if you don't want to be recorded, just be aware that we are. And I'll try to remember to mention that before every single panel, too. So, all right, great. Any additional questions before we start? Okay, great. All right, well, now I want to welcome up some of our panelists. Miles Conway. I'm introducing a few of the speakers as we go along with bios, but for the most part, I'm only doing that per request. So they'll introduce themselves. There's also a QR code on the program where you can click in and read about the bios if you'd like to, too. So you can dig in a little more depth there. So Miles Conway, the CEO of New Mexico Home Builders Association. We have Tomás Rivera from Chainbreaker Collective. We have Juan Torres from Santa Fe County. And then did Faviola? And then Faviola? And if Faviola Chavez is with the Affordable Housing for the City, I know she was incredibly busy with proposals this week. So if she shows up, we'll just pop her right in here at that point. So if you gentlemen want to come up, and we can go ahead and get started. Thank you very much for joining. Yes, I'll grab you.
Thank you, Melanie. Sure. Great to see everybody. My name is Miles Conway, New Mexico Home Builders Association. Who are we? Why are we here? We're part of a national federation. The New Mexico Home Builders Association was formed in 1959. We are comprised of, the contracting community across New Mexico. We have locals that operate all over the state. Of course, we're part of a national federation that is in constant communication in the Oval Office, working with working with our House of Representatives and the Senate to pass really impactful, meaningful housing legislation at the federal, state, and then we love getting involved in the local kind of housing policy, because that is really what enables to take place, what we're here to talk about today, not only the preservation of buildings, but the preservation of our communities. How do we marry those things all together? So afternoon to us all. So this panel sits at the intersection of city government, county government, community advocacy, nonprofit work, housing development. So Santa Fe's growth, it is not theoretical. It is happening right now. Midtown along Airport Road, Hopewell Man on the south side, on county-led projects like Nueva Ezequia, which we'll get to talk about here in a moment, and in neighborhoods that are already asking, what does preservation mean when the people and not just the buildings are at risk? And as I think everybody, another elephant in the room, when we don't plan and allow for really creative growth, it's happening anyway, and you're seeing it manifest kind of on the outskirts of our city in ways that are people like, really? Is that what we wanted? Was that the plan? And the challenges of infill development. Thank you, Mayor Garcia, for your giving voice to that. I know of 3 projects in Santa Fe right now, infill projects. There's an affordable project, by definition. There is an attainable project, and there is another dense infill project. All of them are completely mired within the permitting plan approval process. The reason we're not seeing the kind of growth we want to see in this community is because it's hard. It's the hardest kind of growth, and we're working to solve that now. So our mantra for this year at the New Mexico Home Builders Association: collaborate, construct, change. What is New Mexico's path to housing abundance? I just changed that last word because we formed a really big industry-led coalition that's going to work in tandem with other community-led advocacy coalitions to kind of create housing abundance. We do have a housing supply problem, and supply is part of the answers, and what we're about to talk about right now is some of the policy that goes beyond the supply and to the policy that allows us to preserve these communities. So yeah, we advocate advocacy, we build coalition at our association, and we research. We're really excited to talk about what is the economic impact when we put a family in a house. When we put a family in a house in New Mexico on year 1, it's $60,000 of GRT and other tax revenue for the city. It outweighs the public investment in helping to create that housing by about, I think for every $2 that the city invests in housing infrastructure, housing attainability, you get $3 back. So this is what we're facing. Households unable to afford mortgage on a median priced home. Obviously, 48% of New Mexico renters are cost burdened. We're going to talk a lot about that today. It's worse in Santa Fe than anywhere else. 85% of Santa Feans can't qualify for the mortgage on a median priced home. You see the other numbers there. 32,000 unit deficit in New Mexico. That's the most conservative number we've found, and we've been using it for the last couple years now. Mortgage Finance Authority, other state housing financing groups will say we're in the 40s or in the 50,000 unit deficit. So to the Iron Triangle, I've written about this, I've talked about this. You can have housing of high quality, you can have it fast, or you can have it affordable. Pick 2. because there are 5 levers to breaking that iron triangle, and we kind of need to solve them all at once or nothing works. The structural equity about how we build housing, how we redevelop housing, how we make capital available to communities to preserve their communities. The code and zoning modernization, as Mayor Garcia talked about, we're well into that work. We're into the guts of that for how we allow the kind of housing that Santa Feans can celebrate across the spectrum. Permitting reform, as I also just mentioned, it's $450 of delay per day. So every 2 weeks that an inspection doesn't happen, a month goes by in pure delay, that's like $10,000, between $5,000 and $10,000 added to the cost of a home or the rent. Access to construction capital. We won't get to talk about that too much today because we don't have an expert in the room on like those money people that are in the room and how they stack the capital, but it's very complicated. But we need to make that easier and more accessible. A lot of stuff, good stuff going on at the state on that. And then again, I mentioned framing the economic impact. That is the 5 levers to break that iron triangle. So with that, we are gonna talk frankly about the difference between good growth, growth that damages communities. We'll ask what it means to preserve historic communities, not just historic structures. We'll look at practical side, land, infrastructure, public process, funding, subsidies, political courage. And the question of who gets to stay as Santa Fe changes. So each panelist brings a different lens. Faviola Chavez, happy to see you here. We knew you'd make it, of course. Brings the city's affordable housing perspective. Tomás Rivera brings Chainbreaker's place-based community and civil rights perspective, especially the Hopewell Man and Airport Road areas of our city. Juan Torres brings the county's economic development and land use perspective, including, as I mentioned, Nueva Acequia and emerging land use, land policy tools. So my goal as your moderator will be to kind of surface where these perspectives converge, where they create productive tension, and what Santa Fe can replicate, good things that are happening that we can replicate to really move the needle on housing, prevent displacement, et cetera. So I invite to the stage a good old buddy of mine. We go back a ways, Tomás Rivera of Chainbreaker. Thanks so much. You're here. It's ready to go. Very good.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having us. Mayor Garcia, good to see you. My name is Tomás Rivera. I am the Executive Director of Chainbreaker Collective here in Santa Fe. For those of you who don't know, Chainbreaker is a membership-led economic and environmental justice organization. We have over 800 dues-paying members, most of whom are low-income people of color who live in the Hopewell Man and up and down the Airport Road corridor. We do place-based power building community organizing around a couple of issues. Our bread and butter issue is transportation. We have a bicycle resource center project that's given out over 10,000 bikes. And we do housing. When I say housing, though, I want to just be clear, especially in a space like this. Chainbreaker is not a housing organization. We are a civil rights organization, and we approach our work from a civil rights perspective because housing is a civil rights issue. And that's largely what I'm going to talk about here today. Thank you so much, Miles, for framing the conversation about preserving people. That's largely what we focus on. When we talk about housing, we don't talk about houses. We talk about homes for people. So I'm going to skip through a lot of these because I've made too many slides for the time allotment that I have. But peppered throughout the presentation are some QR codes. There's going to be a lot of data and maps. Feel free to scan them. There will be a couple opportunities for you to grab at them. Chainbreaker wants to just first of all define when we talk about displacement, what we mean and what we think are the roots of those things. First of all, and the key to understanding it is that there is a history of disinvestment in a neighborhood. That is the core component of it. And so when we've been doing our work around housing for the last decade and a half, we have been trying to focus on how do we get ahead of the disinvestment and how do we protect people who are vulnerable to being displaced because of that disinvestment. So this is that's the most important piece. The other thing to just know is that in Santa Fe and throughout the country, disinvestment and gentrification and displacement tend to disproportionately impact low-income people of color. They tend to disproportionately impact and target first renters, and so that is where we tend to organize first. I'm going to skip through these slides again. There will be a QR code if you want to pick up and look deeper for anybody who's into the data. This is a history of displacement in Santa Fe over the last 2 decades. This is in the process of being updated, so this is coming from largely census data of 2000 and 2000. But you can see here that the redder neighborhoods are where we've lost communities of color. This is a marking of just how how segregated our city is by race. So you can see what people talk about the Southside, the Airport Road area, That is where there's larger concentrations of people of color, largely in Santa Fe, Latino and indigenous people. But all people of color tend to be concentrated in these neighborhoods. Chainbreaker focuses in 2 areas. You can see the Hopewell Man neighborhood right in the middle there. Direct center of the city. Mostly that's what our work today is going to be discussed. This is what income looks like, and these numbers are dated. We have new data coming out again, but what we've seen from the preliminary data is not a picture of it getting better. You can see the Hopewell Man neighborhood right in the middle is the lowest income of the city. This is where I live. This is where Mayor Garcia lives. This is my neighborhood. This is where my family has been for many generations, for 4 generations, and where for a good chunk of our neighborhood and our Chainbreaker members live. This is why we have strategized there. When we talk about disinvestment, I like to put the parks slide up because parks are very visible. And although there is a park in our neighborhood, in terms of ratio of acreage, it has effectively 0 per 100,000, per 1,000 renters. Not renters, residents. The area up around Canyon Road where it has 1, that is just like a national forest, so it's not a park. And we show this there because the indicators of risk for displacement are largely disinvestment, and again, parks is just one indicator of it, but one that you can drive around and see. So if you want those, you want more data, feel free to take a picture. You'll have another time to get that QR code in a second. We are working with MASS, we are working with the Santa Fe Indigenous Center to create a neighborhood stabilization plan around Hopewell Man. So updated data around that will show up fairly soon in the next few weeks here. I want to just focus in on why, and I'm setting the stage because this is the work that we do, which is maybe a different perspective than some other folks here. So I want you to know who Chainbreaker is. This is Hopewell Man once again, and we're zooming into all of those indicators of displacement risk. Disinvestment, people of color, and income. Same here for the Airport Road corridor. We have tenant associations and several mobile home parks and apartment complexes peppered throughout the area. And this is what that looks like. So again, when we look at how we target our organizing, where we look at building membership, we're doing it based on where the biggest concentration of risk is, where people need it the most and who are most vulnerable. Largely Airport Road and Hopewell Man. These are Chainbreaker members. These are the folks that make decisions for our organization, for our campaigns, for our policy work on all levels. We say from base to board. And Hopewell Man, that's our old space. That's our old sign that someone painted and we screwed to the wall with a screw gun. We talk a lot about Midtown. When we talk about the risk of displacement, that second piece that pulls the trigger on it is a sudden influx of investment. Midtown here you see is the black circle. Chainbreaker's logo is our literal office that we just bought our building. So come celebrate with us actually tomorrow at 10. But this is why we look at that. This is why we focus so much on Midtown and the development of the Midtown campus so much. This is a panel that we have to talk about that. I see Jamie Blosser just walked in the room, who will be also on that panel from MATA, talking about the community engagement process that started in 2018, which is now, almost 8 years ago, to really create a genuine community engagement process for what Midtown can develop into, and we wanted to just revisit this on Wednesday. So please do come. You are invited to that, to hear that history, and now that decisions are moving forward from that plan, we hope we will see that, we will re-engage in that spirit. Oh my goodness, I have 2 minutes. Should I just stand here and talk? I apologize for speeding through then. So here's a couple just more QR codes I'm going to leave up there. Once again, on your left, we see just the organizational overview. And if you want the reports and some media coverage around this campaign, that's over here to the right. So I know that other people want to talk more, so I won't, but, oh. I'll share them too. Oh, wonderful. Thank you, yes, you're welcome to do that and visit our website. So this is Chainbreaker. Most of what we're going to be talking about, our perspective, is preserving the people and understanding where that risk is. I do see a hand. I'm not sure if it's time for questions right now. We can save them until later on. Okay. But thank you so much for having me. We're really happy to be here.
right, we sort of did this intro sort of in order, so we're like building up to solutions. So that's the community perspective. Now the director of our Office of Housing Affordability, Faviola Chavez, will come up and talk about how she's contemplating and structuring landing government policy with the community voice.
We'll get started. The City of Santa Fe authorizes federal funds, so we're a pass-through entity for the HUD, for housing urban development programs. One in particular is our CDBG program, the Community Development Block Grant. So in issuing those types of funding sources, we are required to conduct environmental reviews for all of our developments. We're very concerned about preserving in place some of the historic preservation and archaeological findings, so we make sure to do the environmental assessments on all of our property. Anytime we break ground, we will contact all of the neighboring tribes. We will let them know that we are breaking ground, and if they have anything that they are concerned about in a particular development, where they can come in and make reference to any concerns that they may have. So we follow all of the NEPA requirements. 24 Code of Federal Regulation requires us to do this, 24 CFR Part 58. And then also we review any floodplains, acequia maps, and things like that, just to make sure that we do not encroach upon any of those types of infrastructure. So we also, before any funds are deployed to any of our projects, any of our affordable housing projects, we want to make sure that, again, we're looking at the maps, we're identifying anything that could be a potential risk, not only for our environment, but also for our residents. Just because this is an affordable housing department, that doesn't mean that this is substandard development. It is not. We make sure that including our species and also being respectful of the tribes and pueblos. So one of our focus in our considerations for environmentals is the historic plaza area. We want to make sure that that remains historic and preserved for future generations. We are very sensitive, again, to our tribal and pueblo members. We do consult with them for cultural sensitivity. Our arroyos and floodplains are also things that we really want to preserve and protect. And then wildlife. We want to make sure that all of our species, if there's species in the developments that we are constructing on, we do proper removal of them and making sure that everything is in place and protected. So why does environmental review matter to the city of Santa Fe? We want to make sure and protect the historical culture here. I'm a 7th generation New Mexican. I feel strongly that we need to protect what we currently have in place. So we want to make sure that we do that on all of our projects. But in particular, we are required to do this on any HUD funding sources. So we want to, again, preserve our acequias, our archaeological resources, and if there's any time that we identify an archaeological finding on our development sites, that immediately is stopped, and we bring in the consultants and they'll evaluate any archaeological findings. Again, we follow HUD and NEPA requirements on all of our CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funding sources. So the city is not only concerned about protecting historical preservation. We're not just worried about maintaining the aesthetic of a community. We want to make sure that our residents are safe. So again, just because you live in an affordable housing development, that does not mean you are getting substandard housing. In the event that there is identification of any type of asbestos or any type of remediation, we definitely make sure that that is done and our residents are protected. So we don't want to develop where there's gas stations. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that any affordable housing person residing in an affordable housing development is safe. Again, we typically do not want to develop where there's any type of dry cleaners, prior dry cleaning facilities, just because of the chemical that could seep into the water and seep into the ground. So, we're very cognizant of the fact that we are required to be good stewards of the dollars that we are entrusted with. And so we go above and beyond to make sure that our residents are safe. So the city of Santa Fe this is the 2024 numbers of our impact. We haven't done our CAPER for our community development block grant funds yet. I don't know if a lot of you know, but those were a little delayed going out this year, and that was because the federal contract required that we incorporate DEI language, and we refused to do that. We're a sanctuary city, and we are not going to be doing that. So we did not, and our deployment of dollars was slow this year. So I'm having to go off of impacts from 2024 because I don't have impacts from 2025 due to that delay. So we have helped rehab. So even if there's a rehab project, it doesn't have to be a construction project, ground up construction. Even if you are doing a rehab project for low to moderate income households where community development block grants those funding sources are incorporated into a project, we ensure that the development, again, is done correctly. So we had 17 existing preservation of homes in 2024, and then we had a production of 2 new units using our community development block grant funds. These funds are based on census tract. We don't get a lot of funding. It's only $600 and some odd thousand per year, but we are required to do a lot of due diligence along with the environmental requirements. So, like I said, we are a pass-through entity for the federal government. There is no shortcuts taken here at the city of Santa Fe. We do protect the residents and archaeological findings. We are respectful of our tribal members and our pueblos, and we will continue to do that. So with that, if you have any questions or concerns about what's happening in affordable housing, I have so much more to talk to you about in terms of how we can move the needle, but I'll leave that for the question and answers, and I'll leave it up to you to contact me, but if you feel free to do so. I'm always available. Miles, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Faviola. The practitioners in our industry are always fascinated, even when they're way on the outskirts of Santa Fe, of the map that is very carefully curated and is not shared publicly because we don't want to divulge these areas, but those archaeological sites, they're everywhere. They're all around us, and it enriches our lives here in Santa Fe. So it's one of the first things that happens when you're talking about redeveloping, digging in the dirt in any way to create a housing opportunity is the city land use officials have to go consult that map, and they have to tell you, all right, you're good to go to the next step, or we're gonna bring the archaeologist over to assess that. So we're gonna let them get Juan's. Juan Torres' slides up here, because this is a fun part. We've talked about community principles, community priorities. We've talked about some of the tools that the city is managing. And now we're going to get to talk about, my favorite topic, which is housing is economic development. And the county has, and Juan at the helm here has done some really creative work. So I think we're ready to roll. We just got to he's going to toggle that over. It works. Okay. As a 55-year-old, my birthday party's coming up. Anyway, 55, I'm always constantly amazed when technology works. I'm like, wow, it's a miracle. And it is miraculous. So, Mr. Torres, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Miles. And thank you, Melanie, for inviting me here. I really appreciate it. My name is Juan Torres. I'm the Economic Development Manager for Santa Fe County. Some bits of population information for the entire county, and I think it's fairly close to consistent with what you'll find in the city as well. Sorry about that. I'm the first one that didn't get into the mic. And by the way, on our Santa Fe County website in economic development, there are demographic tools open to the public, so you can go and you can explore communities, streets, areas, and get this kind of information down to the community level to help you as you look through different things. You know, when it says there's 11,355 businesses in the county, about, I would say, 10,000 of those are one-person, two-person operations. And so it kind of has a kind of skew effect that the largest employers are government and healthcare, as well as the Los Alamos National Laboratory. I think nothing is fairly surprising in any of this information. The challenges, of course, you know, we have small businesses and we're trying to help them develop. The rural communities outside of the city, Madrid, Cerrillos, and whatnot, is really, those are the challenges. We have a large tourism industry, and we have a high cost of living, which affects affordable housing as well as kind of workforce and business attraction. The target industries that we focus on are the same as the target industries that the city focuses on. So subsequently, we work very closely with the city, and we have been over the last few years. We've set up the city has an entire infrastructure for their economic development. We have a program that is focused on a website that we've set up called the Encantado Network. And that is a kind of business hub resource area. People can go there and check it out. There's a QR code. We're encouraging people to do that. We are engaged in a microgrant program, but basically trying to do business outreach and business development, as well as community development. So, you know, there's been a number of different, you know, this is a little bit of our stats of what we've done so far. We're doing a workforce training program with the community college, and the city's also a partner in that as well, for a backlot project and some of the things that we've done. Again, I mean, I think these are the collaborations that I talk about. The microgrant programs, one of the reasons we decided to align our program with the cities is so that we would avoid the obvious problem of, oh, you're in the city, you're in the county, you can't get this resource or you can't get that resource depending on where you're physically at. So we wanted to bring those things together so that it doesn't matter whether you're in the city or in the county. If we have a grant program, we want to make that available to you, and as well as our services overall. We're working with the city on their Midtown campus on an innovation hub there project, and that certainly impacts the Hopewell Man area, and we're very top of mind. I happen to have a long history, worked for the city many years ago as an economic development specialist, went to the state, and I worked there as a finance development director for the LEADER program, and I'm back at the county. So I can see the full perspective of this area and the region. In fact, the Midtown campus, I did some of the preliminary work to purchase that property originally from the brothers and then to lease it to the laureate. So I have a deep understanding of that property and what's going on and what's needed. These are some initiatives we're working on going forward. The cities started this Santa Fe Native Entrepreneurial Outreach Program, and we're joining in with them in this next fiscal year. So starting in 2027, we will be expanding that program to all the areas of the county. So that's a great opportunity to expand into technical assistance for tribal entities. We're doing events, we're doing infrastructure, we're doing everything we can to try to provide the foundation from which communities can look and see what they want to do, like Chainbreaker, to kind of motivate the community into the areas that they want to help develop. To the extent that I'll tease a couple of things, and Miles kind of mentioned it. We're working very closely with the city as well as with the Lincoln Land Institute. And with Lincoln, they're developing a property tool that's gonna allow us to search all the parcels in Santa Fe County. And what we want to do is try to determine which parcels have the best opportunities for growth in housing based on proximity to transportation, other assets. And they've been a great, over the last 24 weeks, we've worked with them. So we've been developing this tool. And again, it's a city-county tool to help us figure out how we can better align resources and other needs towards the development of affordable housing. Separate from that, the city and the county is working together on another tool. Hopefully we'll be able to bring that out in the next couple of months, but it is a web-based toolkit that will allow communities to assess projects that they want to promote and allow them through some toolkits to be able to develop those projects to the point where they can bring them into the ICIP, which is the Infrastructure Capital Improvement Plan at the state, and to put those into the appropriate funnels, if you will, both at the city and the county, so that they can be properly evaluated. And then they could also measure against existing plans that are out there. There's a lot of plans, and we have a lot of enthusiastic people, but it's really important to kind of focus people back towards those plans to say, do these need to be developed? There's a lot of public outreach and a lot of public input, and that's really key to it. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm happy to participate. Thank you very much for your time, and let's get started. Thank you.
All right, as our panelists get situated here, and I think we probably have to turn these on. Switch, and it's working. Okay.
Hello.
And just to kick us off, I mean, I think Mayor Garcia deserves another round of applause. My very first public testimony before the city council in the early 2000s, it was like, oh, no. The county and the city, they don't work together. That's different turf. And it sounded crazy at the time. It sounded in December, and I think there's been a big push by your administration to say, no, we're one kind of, we're one people here. So thank you, Mayor, for that and that focus. So I think we are about right on schedule, and we have about 50 minutes for this discussion, right? 10:45, is that our target? Oh, yes. Yeah, we're gonna try to have a little back and forth here for 25 minutes, and we'll open it up to the audience. So I'm trying to pick the question that kind of seems most responsive to what everybody just did in their opening remarks, and I've decided I'll go for the last question first. You know, so getting real, talking about the intersection between community intention, principles and goals, the funding, the money, the city's Affordable Trust Fund, other state and federal subsidy. I want to talk about how preservation of neighborhoods, preventing displacement, you know, either you're seeing it work in the region by successful policy work, or across the nation. You know, in this capitalist-driven system, we're trying to preserve communities and neighborhoods. What's working? What should Santa Fe do in the next 12 months to sort of set the table in ways that keep people and communities rooted here? And I'll go to our first presenter and then pass the mic around.
Well, thank you for the question, Miles. I think, one, a lot has been done, so we're not starting from scratch. I think I mentioned the community development plan around the Midtown campus was almost a decade in the works here. Certainly the organizing that we've been doing and that many organizations have been 20 years in the making. And displacement is not new to Santa Fe. This is not a new dynamic for the country. And it is a hard challenge to address, for sure. I think that, one, there's the longest term, and that is the getting ahead of the disinvestment piece. So neighborhoods historically in Santa Fe and around the country, some purposefully, some I believe less so in Santa Fe, were targeted with disinvestment. And so we're living with that generations down the road. What we can do is be more proactive about investing in neighborhoods, and we're talking about city infrastructure, things like parks, which we put that slide up, things like sidewalks, drainage, all of the infrastructure that's important, things like jobs, economic development. You can't just build a house and say, great, people can live here now, right? They need places to go to school and eat. So all of that, and I think that this isn't new, it's been worked on. I think the longest term is that. If we want to not have the levels of segregation and gentrification in the city 20 years from now, we need to get ahead of it now. So that's the first piece. The second one is making sure we stabilize the areas that are most at risk right now. That also has a long term and a short term in it. We think that housing stability in the longest term needs to be really about affordability. There is certainly a need to build units. That's talked about a lot when housing is discussed. Absolutely, that's the case. Many of our members are very low-income people that are not going to be able to get into those houses in any meaningful, reasonable amount of time. And the units that they're in are already affordable right now. So we talk about they're affordable right now, is what I should say. So we talk about that level of preservation. The first that we think is I would say the medium term, which is probably the rest of my lifetime, is things like community land trusts. Making sure that we can insulate the housing that is affordable at the moment from the erratic whims of the market. We stop people from flipping and incentivizing there. So that's one, that's something that
I think you're
Chainbreaker's
going to have to
working on.
talk about the community land trust for 60 more seconds.
I keep getting more time. I love this panel. A community land trust is many things, and there are many approaches to this. When we're talking about a community land trust, in general, it is a model of governance of land and housing that is collectively stewarded. So we would create, and Chainbreaker has started the process of this, to create an entity, usually a nonprofit, that stewards a certain amount of land. The land itself is held in trust. Oftentimes, the units above are either ownable, so they can be owned by individuals as houses or apartments or condos or even businesses, and also rental units, and that's what we're looking for here. Much more than 60 seconds to talk about, but that's the kind of what we mean by that. And what that does is that makes it so that the needs of one individual or the desires of one individual are not outweighed by the desires of the entire collective. So that's kind of, I think, the how do we keep it stable in an area like Hopewell Man. And the most emergency level is to really protect renters who are the most vulnerable. And so that's an entire slate of renter protections, things that stop people from being vulnerable to predatory rent increases, to predatory evictions, to having their rights just respected. The few renter protections that exist right now, there are not meaningful enforcement mechanisms. You mentioned some of the DEI stuff that's being erased from us. HUD right now is the largest enforcement mechanism for renter rights in the country, and in Santa Fe has gotten directives to attack the people who are living in the apartments. And so that's just boo. That's right, absolutely boo. And so, I mean, these are really what we're looking at here is a slate of, yes, investment long-term down the road, but we can't do those investments without making policy that stabilizes the neighborhood in the meantime. That's the short answer.
All right. Faviola, over to you. I think examples from around the country that you have some experience with, or maybe locally here, programs that are working to kind of address directly this displacement issue. What programs would you turbocharge?
So the city of Santa, can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay. No, that's too much. So the city of Santa Fe is looking at some initiatives to really retain some of our property. So what has happened in the past is that normally we will do land disposition or land sales or donations of the land, and so that we can continue to move the needle for affordable housing. One of the problems with selling or donating the land to a for-profit or nonprofit developers is once the land is gone, it's gone. And our next generation will not have leverage on incorporating affordable housing. So that's a concern for me in particular, because I come, again, from different places, and well, I'm from New Mexico, but I've moved around quite a bit. And what I have seen in a lot of communities is if the city doesn't retain the asset, the capital, it's gone. And that's our leverage. To help develop more affordable housing, we need to think about potentially leasing the land and then having the developer have a first right of refusal at the end of the lease, 30 to 100-year lease. The state land office does that. They do not sell their land. They maintain it, and hospitals can come and build, and they can stay in there for 100 to however long. But we want to start kind of modeling that same development mechanisms, just because, again, we are worried for the next generation. I won't be here forever, and I worry about the younger generation. I also worry about them being educated here in New Mexico and staying in New Mexico. And so what we do know is that our population is becoming quite a bit older, and the younger generation is moving out of the city of Santa Fe. So we know those things. Those are two facts that we know. So what I would like to see, that I don't really have control over, but what I would like to see in my experience of systemic poverty and getting out of systemic poverty is education. We need education mechanisms here so that our younger generation can stay here. And I don't care if it is, you don't need to go to college. Not everyone needs to go to college. But if you can get a trade, you'll get a better paying job. You can help your community and stabilize it. So what I'm really interested in is bringing educational resources into Santa Fe, because, as I said, we know our population is aging. So what are those type of educational resources? That's occupational therapy assistant programs that Pima Medical Institute and Brookline College run out of Albuquerque. We need those things here. So we need to educate our younger generation. And then another concern that the city has is our employees. Our employees do not live in the city that they are part of. And so that is a concern. In the event that we have an emergency, it's going to take about an hour for everyone to be here and to act quickly. So we are thinking about putting in some properties that will be scattered sites and can potentially be used for some of our employees. We are not the saviors of everyone. We just don't have the resources. We're very limited on what we can do, because the federal government is not really injecting a lot of capital here, just because of the census tract and the census count, I should say. So we're trying to figure this out. It's not going to be an easy fix. It's a holistic fix. This needs to become everybody's problem. Everyone from the police to economic development to everyone. It needs to the residents. It needs to become everyone's problem, because this is not getting better. We know that after COVID, our construction costs have increased to 74% through tariffs. That's insanity. Like, we cannot do it alone. So we need everyone's participation, a holistic approach to resolving this affordable housing crisis that we're in.
All right. Yeah, thank you. I'm hearing two calls for community land trusts. It's very interesting. I'm glad Juan's going to get to talk about this next. And what other your favorite ideas are to talk about, I'll invite you. But this concept of eviction prevention, rental assistance, the funding that's necessary for it. You mentioned the community land trust, both of you, and who is going to do the work in these neighborhoods that is going to be helping the structures to stay livable? It's going to be smaller contractors. The big guys, the big outfits, I don't see them participating in that kind of micro redevelopment work. And so I'm glad, Juan, when you mentioned in your talk, like, hey, these micro grants that we can start to support our smaller contractors to start to interact in these neighborhoods. I guess I'm curious, just one thing before, and anything you want to talk about are your favorite ideas in the next 12 months to grow in good ways. But how does the money follow community land trusts? Are you familiar with any of that? Like, I know that like when you're writing a note for investment on a piece of land and the structure, easy peasy, well, relatively easy peasy. Now that we're writing a note just on the structure itself, a mortgage, more difficult, but good for redevelopment, tougher for raw land.
Yes, it's a complicated issue. I think it's more aligned with the kind of subsidized home purchase that we do through entities like HomeWise, where there's multiple entities that hold on to a piece of the equity, and then if that equity is sold, then there is kind of a give back on the difference between the delta, if you will, between what it was originally and what it made, and it stays in this kind of perpetual, hopefully, affordable level. We run an affordable home ownership program at the county, and we do down payment assistance. Those assistance is what puts a lien, what we call a soft second, on the property, and when that entity sells it, then we recover a portion of that interest, and then we encourage that to be sold to another affordable entity. And if they do maintain that, then they have additional kind of resources available. With regards to land trusts specifically, I think they're just getting one started in Raton. They have an established one in part of Albuquerque. And historically, my understanding is that Washington, D.C. was essentially a land trust that was developed, and it was quite an innovative thing for the 1700s, but that was how they were able to take all the land around that swamp, empty the swamp. It's a little full now, and then reapportion it to the landowners, so that subsequently, if you had 10 acres, before that, you might end up with 4 acres, but it was developed. And so then you can go from there. And so that actually created an interesting wealth dynamic, and it's still, to this day, you'll see certain family names of Washington, and they are still there, and they still own the land. So it's a lot of innovation, a lot of interesting stuff. Again, the Lincoln Land Policy Institute, tremendous group, does a lot of work in this area. I've worked with them. I think Joanna, my counterpart at the city, is a fellow at the Lincoln Land Institute. So in these issues. On the micro side, micro grants, I mentioned we have roughly 11,000 listed businesses in the county, and a vast majority of them are small enterprises, 1- and 2-person shops. A lot of them are construction companies. Not to get on the bandwagon of beating up on the Los Alamos National Laboratory, but what happens is those entities and their workers get attracted to the things that are going on in Atlanta, and they get paid a significant amount. And there's one very clear example I met very recently in the last few months, a small construction company right in Pewaukee. Family's been doing it for 70 years. Son's inherited the business. His great office manager has left, and she went to join in Atlanta, and he said, what could I do to keep you here? And she was like, there's nothing you could do. I mean, they pay me more than your whole company makes in a year. So it's a challenge once you develop those things, and we try to work by increasing their capacity, those small companies, to be able to take on subcontractor roles and be able to participate in the bidding process, both at the federal level, but also at the county and the city level. So we've put on a number of events about how to do business with the county, how to do business with the city, trying to streamline the process. Basic problems, bonding are issues. So again, building the capacity within organizations to help them develop. Really quickly, when the original part of your question about successful projects or programs, the New Mexico Main Street program is the premier program for placemaking and redevelopment in historic areas. I have to give them a shout out there through the Economic Development Department. And they do a wonderful job in rural areas of helping communities to rehabilitate historic properties, utilizing tax credits, which is a very complicated process. And basically, again, by organizational kind of infrastructure development, getting the community to take part in their own, developing an organization that, like Chainbreaker, will move the community objectives forward. And so they're a great organization, have done a lot of really great things. A little back to our Nueva Sequia project, that was a development that was originally started by Joseph Maestas. And if those of you that may know Joseph Maestas ran the Mortgage Finance Authority for a number of years. He's all over the place, really great guy. And he came up with this idea of like, hey, why doesn't the county just go ahead and do our own development? That's a crazy concept, and he took that concept, and 3-4 years ago, and we worked on that and put some efforts into it. Anyway, now that project is about 90% financed through low-income housing tax credits, at both at the 4% and the 9% level. There's equity involved from private investors, and we're about $1 million short at this point on a $40 million project that includes senior housing and regular housing as for non-seniors, 100% affordable, renewable, energy efficiencies, the whole 9 yards. It's an expensive project, and it's not necessarily reproducible in that category, but it's a good demonstration project, I think. It's off of Zaffarano Road, so it's in the city, and the decision was a plot of land that the county owned to move that forward and get a lot of partners, including Project Moxie. I know many people know them. And so we're trying to reach out to equity investors that are interested in socially relevant projects. So the New Mexico Impact Investors Group, we're talking with them. They represent foundations, and they're bringing capital to the market to promote their foundation goals. And they want to make some return on their investment, so they're not grants, but they're willing to give up a portion of that return on that investment towards the goals that they're trying to get. So I think that's a very good model for us to really look at a public-private partnership with foundations and other entities that are willing to give up a little bit of equity or a little bit of kind of return on investment to promote their goals.
Yeah. So I want to kind of let's keep it on this vein, both to Tomás and Faviola, whoever wants to go first. But yeah, in the private sector, it's got to pencil out. The builder has to bring food home to their table. But in the public sector, in a public-private partnership sort of arrangement, there can be, we're trying to get out of the habit of calling it subsidy, because it has a connotation, right? But investment, the concept of the city. And maybe we could start let's drive our conversation over to Midtown or maybe the Hopewell Man neighborhood. How do you see kind of stemming from the Nueva Sequia example of creating affordable housing, how do you see maybe that conceptually public-private partnership applying to the kind of the redevelopment and the anti-displacement work that needs to go on at Midtown or the Hopewell Man neighborhood?
You want me to? Okay. So Juan, thank you for talking about the Nueva Sequias project. The city did inject also capital into that project, about $1 million. So it's like baking a cake. You have layers and layers and layers of capital stacks when you're dealing with low-income housing tax credits. So we really know that it takes a village, right? It takes a lot of partnerships to do these types of developments. It's not just a one person does it all. In terms of Midtown, I would love to see some of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars go in to help develop the Midtown campus. That we have so much potential there. We're on the move thanks to Carly Vendetti, my colleague. She's phenomenal, and she has some really awesome master plans that she's working on, and we're helping in the Affordable Housing department to do a lot of her pro formas, analysis, and stuff like that. So, it takes a village. We need to really think about how we can invest in ourselves The city is always very willing and able to help developers. I'm an advocate that we have to help ourselves also. And so, Mayor, I hope you don't mind me saying that, but I really do feel like it is important that in order for us to be able to help the nonprofits and the for-profit developers that want to come into City of Santa Fe and develop, we need to make sure that we are also doing our part to have the infrastructure in place so it's not so challenging for them to develop. And that is the Midtown campus. The Midtown campus needs a lot of infrastructure, the way it was designed, ground infrastructure. So the way it was designed when we did the agreement way back when, it was the city's responsibility to put in the ground infrastructure. The last time I've talked to Carly, that was over $78 million that they needed to do that. Well, I hope that at some point in time, the housing trust, not the housing trust, the Santa Fe Trust Fund can help develop and put some capital into that project. So through Affordable Housing Trust Fund, so.
I'm glad you bring that up because I think the concept of exactions, let's just pretend there's a family in the Hopewell Man neighborhood who's like, you know, we have to do some major improvements to our home, and they come in and, hey, maybe we're going to try to put a casita here so that our mom can move in there, or their son or daughter or family, any family can move back in. Then oftentimes as a development sort of approval, the exactions are like, well, you're going to have to widen that sidewalk. You're going to have to improve the streets and gutters right here. So oftentimes the city will apply just, you know, a lot of what we call them exactions in the industry, like additional costs that for that small scale developer, that property owner, like, oof, this it looks like we're gonna need too much money all of a sudden. I can't afford to do this. Tomás, you've been focused a lot on this concept of hyper localized redevelopment and projects that prevents displacement. How do you see all these three pieces dovetailing together?
Yeah, thank you. We don't have to pretend that family is there. There's at least 2 of them in the room right now. I imagine that there's more. That is the reality. My house is 100 years old. It was built by my grandparents out of the dirt they dug up out of the backyard. And that's not like a thing I say. That's what happened out there. So yeah, it needs a lot of work on it. And it is, frankly, punitive to try to fix up the house. So folks like myself are faced with this, what I believe to be a false choice of, do we just allow our house to slowly erode, or do we try to invest in it and watch the property value go up and push my neighbors out? That is the kind of conundrum that we're facing as an entire neighborhood, not just from my house and people like me that are lucky enough to have had a house that is a legacy home. But that's the investment piece that we always talk about, and that's why Chainbreaker always talks about development without displacement. Because we recognize we need all of these things. I can't just let the roof cave in, right? But if there's no option in there, that's different. I think most of our members don't have the heartburn about using the word subsidy. I think that there's subsidies everywhere, but I will not use it for the purpose of this panel and just say those investments are very, very real, and the question is, where do those investments come from and where do they go to? I think that what we have going for us in Santa Fe is really good partnerships. This could be a much different process around Midtown. And there were times when it was a different process, and I think that we've come to a much better place. So we not only investments in terms of money and capital, absolutely necessary, more of it needed, let's figure out how to do that, but investments in time, investments in just heart, right, that we put in there. I see city staff people in the room, not just at this table. I see Liz Camacho in the room that we have worked with for many, many years to try to figure it out. I see Maria Tucker in the room. I, of course, see Mayor Garcia in this room. There's hours and hours and hours of sitting around a table, sometimes butting heads, sometimes holding hands. That level of investment is like the most fundamental thing because we're building based on relationships. Now, we recognize that a lot of the way that Midtown has evolved has been a dramatic investment, not just of that time, but also of the money that the city has spent. There is debt service on it. There is all of the need for what you just said there, which that is why I say we're not a housing organization, because I believe you. But that's not what I need to figure out as Chainbreaker. That's not what we need to figure out. But we do need to partner those things together and figure out how do we use public resources for the public good, which is, in my mind, those kinds of investments. So the community development plan that is hundreds and hundreds of community members gave their input is moving forward. The neighborhood stabilization plan is going to be released in a couple weeks here. There's really the question about what policy choice is going to be brought before us, because what you just said requires somebody making a decision at some point. And how are we going to do that in response to the community that's there? Because it does need to pencil out, and we need to let people's lives be part of that equation.
Yeah, I want to allow, respond to that. I
well,
was
no,
thinking about
no.
super complexity stuff, super impactful programs, still pretty darn complex. The community group, like, how are you going to translate this to your mom? Like, Mom, how do you access these resources? So back to the beginning.
But picking up on the developer assistance, which I think is critical and key. So we put in $10 million for a 3 to 5 year program for developer assistance. And I don't find it pejorative at all to sit down and say, we're going to sit down with the developer and let's figure out how you can make this work. We can add financial resources to the mix, but on the other side of the coin, we also need to be involved in looking closely at the pro forma, and I'm sorry for the technical term, it's the financials associated with the project that lay out how that becomes a profitable project. And oftentimes those are very closely held documents, but when I was at the state and the economic development department there was a requirement that you share your 3-year pro forma or 3 years of actual performance in order to start the conversation about whether your project is viable or not. And we've started that process working closely with the affordable housing team and myself to get in there and say, okay, you're saying your project needs $1 million. I take a look at it and I go, I think if you do this and this, you can get away with 500,000, and we can give you that 500,000. That's how you move the project forward. Again, it doesn't address everything, but it kind of moves slowly moves the needle forward. On the community resource side, again, I alluded to this tool that we're developing with the city. That tool, hopefully, it's a web-based tool, and it'll be able to give individual communities the access to scenario planning, to mapping, to different other things that they can figure out and look at what their potential development projects that they want to promote. And these are mostly public, so if I want to center, to see how that works, to work within their community to get input and feedback, stakeholder input is imperative because you're going to build something and then some people are going to say, wait a minute, I wasn't consulted. I don't like that. I don't want to be a part of that. So it's very critical that hopefully that tool will be available by the end of the summer, early fall. And so we'll be able to test drive that and see how that works. But that's basically giving the tools to the communities to say, we want this and this is the justification and this is how we suggest you can fund it.
So I'm going to give Faviola the final word, and then we're going to jump into the audience here. But this concept, again, of conquering this 5-headed hydra of housing affordability. Interested how it all stacks together. I mean, for this family, generational family in the Hopewell Man neighborhood, like maybe the city's creating a community land trust, or somebody like Chainbreaker's creating a community land trust. I can deed restrict our property, sell that property to the city. It's going to enable the capital to come to me. Plus, Juan's coming around the corner here with some local contractor incentives. I'm gonna sustain my house. I'm gonna maybe even expand a room to create a multi-generational kind of living environment here with another casita or something. I think it's exciting, and but in Santa Fe, we're going to do it differently. But it's an exciting moment here. Again, echoing Thomas's partnerships here that exist. So
yeah, they're great mechanisms. They're great tools, for developing affordable housing. So in Phoenix, there was a housing trust that preserved a certain amount of developments for I don't know, they preserved it for about 15 to 20 years, and anytime anyone sold in that land trust, they had to sell and give back a portion of their equity into the land trust. It does work. There's models throughout the country. We've seen it. It does work. But the city can't do it. You know, it's not part of the city's role to do this. So it takes people like Chainbreakers to come in and say, hey, I want to develop this land trust and create it and deploy it. And so it will work, I believe, and I believe with your leadership it will, and I believe it will work here. But again, capital's king, right? Cash is king, and when you don't have that, it makes it very, very challenging to be able to move the needle and develop, because there's so much need, and there's so many requirements, right? Like if you do a low-income housing tax credit, you have to make it affordable for 15 years, and you have to make sure that it cash flows. And if it doesn't, guess what? Your investors are going to come in, and they're going to pull your 8609, which is your tax credit waiver, and the project's going to be in big trouble with the federal government if you're not cash flowing in 15 years. So we're thinking collaboratively too. We're thinking in the event that a developer wants to come in and develop in the city of Santa Fe, maybe including some mechanisms where we would get some of the deferred developer fee and they would get a tax abatement. This isn't set in stone. It's something that we're thinking about, we're looking into. We're also looking in how to revolve some of these monies that the city is entrusted with. So right now, the way the Affordable Housing Trust Fund works is that it is a grant. We need to be able to have that grant recirculate and come back in, maybe charge an interest rate, 2%, on the Affordable Housing Trust Funds so that they can come in and recirculate and go out to someone else that needs it. So there's a lot of ways that we can try to move the needle on the need for capital, because it's always capital that's needed. There is ways that we can do that, and then we also enjoy working with partners, nonprofit partners that come in and build the affordable housing that we have in our community. But again, it's going to take some lessons learned, and we're going to need to make some adjustments.
All right, I see our microphone runner here to the wing here. Story, thanks for being here. So yeah, we all have our eyes on this federal housing legislation, the first piece of federal housing legislation in a generation, and there might be greater pipelines of CBDG money, or HUD money, homes money for those municipalities who have amended their zoning, streamlined their permit review process. That'll be a new carrot stick that the federal government is going to try to beat Santa Fe over the head with, but we need that capital to flow this way for these creative things. So to the question. Oh, here it comes. And introduce yourself, if you would.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm working over at Keller Williams, and so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the 3% excise tax, where that's going, and if it's actually making an impact.
You got the lawyer brief on that?
That's a great question. We are currently in a lawsuit, so we are not able to use any of the excise tax. So it is sitting in a bank account at the city, unused, because an organization out there decided that they didn't like this initiative that the voters passed, right? It wasn't the city of Santa Fe, it was the voters. And they weren't happy with that. And so they decided that they would sue the city multiple times and keep it held up in court. So that's where we're at. So I advocate to you to please, and talk to your neighbors, let people know that this is happening. The voters voted on this. We do need to relinquish these dollars and start putting them into the community. So it's up to all of us to really start talking about it.
May I respond, Faviola? I think, not just to underscore, it was passed by 2/3 support. 2/3 of the people have voted it.
Yeah.
So That means most of the city by far supports this. So it is being held hostage in account right now. That money is desperately needed. That money is something that has been absolutely supported for by the people. And so we're counting on the courts to do their job, although we look around and see what that means. But that means that also we need to figure out how to keep moving that support and translate it into policy, into political courage. How can we figure out how to not just move that money, but create new programs like this to fuel the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in this work?
Thank you.
$1.5 million
is-
dollars.
So,
We have a question there and there. Want to go right here and then quickly over here.
My name's Jake Barrow. I'm with Cornerstones Community Partnerships. So I've lived here long enough to really appreciate this connection between the South County and the city, which we haven't always had. And so that's a great thing to hear about. And so what it leaves me to think about a little bit is that this is a city and county problem, but you know, we have a regional issue here. And when we talk about, it comes up a lot about this story about Los Alamos. But I mean, you know, what needs to happen in my mind is that Los Alamos County and Santa Fe County, and maybe even Sandoval, Rio Arriba, San Miguel, I mean, all of this, and it has to do with traffic, it has to do with water, it has to do with infrastructure, and unless we get on top of this regionally, you know, we're solving little problems in little areas, but we have a regional issue. So I just, maybe there's a comment on that from somebody there.
So really quickly on that, just to respond, we are working directly with North Central Economic Development District, which is a multi-county COG in northern New Mexico. So all the counties you just mentioned, including the city of Santa Fe as well. So it's on our radar. It's a difficult push because there's so many different interests. When Lionel first announced their multi-billion-dollar expansion, and that's above and beyond their existing budget, by the way, a 10-year, $10 billion expansion that includes a lot of construction. We were all kind of flabbergasted at that and what that impact's going to be. But we're actively trying to address those kinds of things through the North Central Economic Development District, COG, which is a council of government, a quasi-government entity.
I mean, the sooner that Los Alamos, and they've made great strides in being kind of a more walkable, warm, kind of neighborhoody kind of downtown, the better, because we know right now that just anecdotally, there's some apartment complexes in Santa Fe that are 90% full of people earning in the upper around $200,000 a year. Those units would be much more appropriate for more modest income people. Another problem is that people that are living in Los Alamos or working in Los Alamos, they kind of would rather live here anyway. They'd rather take a 45-minute drive than live in the community that they're working in. So, yeah, they're hiring up our trades. Challenges there. So the question, come over here.
Also involving a regional issue for the state. In this area, second homes are taking up a lot of construction costs and whatever. Many people, say like the ones from Texas, come from places where there's no income tax. And lucky the limit on assessment of real property requires that it be fair. That's because like Valentin Valdez fighting the property taxes that push people out of the East Side historic neighborhoods because they couldn't afford the property tax. My question is, the state has to act also, and I'm wondering, I've heard of people who own second homes who make sure not to stay in Santa Fe or New Mexico for more than 6 months, because at that point they'd have to pay income taxes as the rest of us do. I would think one simple measure would be to require people who get that advantage be domiciled here and have to pay income taxes.
That's interesting. Just one anecdotal thing. South Carolina, red meat, hard right South Carolina. If you were a second, I could lose my job for saying this out loud right now, but they raised the property taxes for those second homeowners that were vacant, and that money in South Carolina went to support housing affordability programs. But anyway, anybody here? don't send that back. Let's see, anyone else want to respond to that?
Just that I think that Chainbreaker's work is all local, all in the city, so I can only speak to that, but that's exactly the thing that we're talking about. I'm glad that people are not showing up to this conversation with the tax phobia that I often hear at this. Like, we have public resources, they need to be put to good use. Again, 2/3 of the city pass a transfer tax. There is support for this. We don't need to talk to our neighbors about this, actually. We need to talk to the people that are holding it hostage. And we do that through the voting system. So not just free up the mansion tax, but let's create more sources here.
So somebody up here, very top of the room. And then down here to this row after that.
And I think really quickly, I think the number is 20% of the homeowners in Santa Fe are second homeowners.
1 out of 5.
And we're in the 5-minute lightning round here, so questions and
Great. My name is Jordan. I care a lot about affordability. There's a lot of liberal cities that are plagued by an over-regulatory environment, and I'm displeased to hear of more policies that create more barriers for development. Where does the discussion with land use about opening up our market to more development come in? I think there was an assertion that building new homes doesn't create affordability. That is not an economically sound thing to state. So how are you working with a land use policy update to ensure that homes can be built, that affordable developers won't be held up in months and year-long processes with the city? Thank you.
Melanie, can we have 30 more minutes? I got
So-
plenty to
Just
say
real-
about
Can I
this.
just directly address, and then I'll back off? I'm not sure anybody on this panel did make that statement. Certainly, it didn't come from me. I think we do need to build more units.
Yes.
But that is not going to magically trickle down to the people who are barely paying their rent right now. So we do need to have a two-pronged approach. Certainly, Chainbreaker supports and recognizes the need to build more units and to actually start development, which is why we talk about development without displacement. So the development side.
Yeah, I think 100 market rate units creates around 40 affordable units as people start to move around. That's the latest Pew Charitable Trust, I think, report I saw.
Really quickly, we all recognize at the city and the county that we need to do a better job on the development review, the permitting. It takes too long, and days add dollars to the cost of projects. But at the end of the day, we're trying desperately to figure out more ways to provide more affordable housing. But in this region, affordability is in the 120% AMI range. The New Mexico Mortgage Authority, which controls a lot of the financing around housing, I don't know that they ever finalized the rule, but they were looking at trying to get up to 120% of AMI, and some people might roll their eyes and say, well, that means a $100,000 person with a three family could get a thing. That's what it takes, and I mean, I think we need to address it on both ends, both market rate and affordability. Now, I'm going to leave this with you, that the Opportunity Zone program is a program that has been existing over the last 10 years. It's now revived, and it's coming back. There's going to be 3 Opportunity Zone areas in Santa Fe County, 2 of those in the city and 1 in the county. And that's going to be an incentive for investors to come and build, especially housing, full market housing, quite honestly, because they're not going to be able to stack the subsidies or the different tax credits. But that is happening now, and we're working with the city to get that, our preferred census tracts to the governor's office for designation. Once that designation gets done, that'll be in place for 10 years. Investors will be able to write off, they'll be able to defer and then write off their entire equity investment in their projects in those census tracts. So it's a really, really lucrative incentive, and we are now working with the Urban Policy Institute. We're through a pitch on the 9th of June. The Santa Fe County Commission will have a presentation from the Urban Policy Institute on the subject of opportunity zones, and we will be exploring the downside and the upside of those. And there's a lot of downsides, and there's a lot of policy issues that could be addressed at the local zoning level and other ways. So just watch out for that Opportunity Zone 2.0 program that's just getting started right now.
Yeah. When Oregon first passed its statewide law to allow duplexes, multiplexes, quadplexes by right, they were getting, at 2018, there were 2% of the permits pulled were for those building typologies. Once Portland and Salem and Beaverton allowed for you to cover more of the lot with the duplex, the triplex, the quadplex, today it's at 28% of the permits pulled in those cities of Portland. So
And
It's a
Miles.
zoning question too.
Great to the foresight of Mayor Garcia. He put me under Heather Lamboy, the Planning and Land Use Director. So her and I have been working very collaboratively in moving permits and making sure that time is money, and making sure that we are doing what we need to do at the city to put units in the ground. And I work very closely with her and her land use agreement. She has done a phenomenal job that allowing anyone that wants to build an ADU in their backyard has the opportunity to do that. So thank you for being collaborative with us. It takes a village. And so I really appreciate the support that I'm given by my colleagues and also Mayor Garcia.
All right, thanks to the panelists. We're going to do jumping jacks. I'm sorry we ran out of time for the last question, but we want to leave time for exercise, right? So thanks for the panelists. Thanks for the questions. Thank you, Melanie, and everybody.
Hello, so I'm going to do a brief introduction for all of the panelists. I'm going to start first with Miguel Acosta. Miguel Acosta was born in Chicago but made in Mexico. He is currently co-director at Earth Care, a multi-generational community leadership and learning organization in Santa Fe. He's also a principal associate. He was also a principal associate at the Center for Regional Learning, an international consulting firm based in Conway, which focuses on building family, community, school partnerships. Earth Care's relevant project is now Vincenades. Did I say it right? Vincenades. Practicing my Espanol, which I'm still trying, and they describe it as a community health and neighborhood development partnership. So help me to welcome our first panelist for today, Miguel.
Thank you. It's vecindades, right? And I did want to actually make one comment about language. We tried, right? I know that there was an effort made to try to get an interpreter, because we had several families and staff that wanted to come that needed interpretation, and it didn't happen for this time. But we do encourage everybody in Santa Fe to always have justice language access as part of your planning for any kind of convening, because we're having all these conversations about what the future of Santa Fe is, and the folks that maybe need to be in the room can't be in the room because of the language access. Anyway, and just let me clarify too. I was made in Mexico. My parents, when they moved from Mexico to Chicago, my mom was already 6 months pregnant. So I was made in Mexico, and I actually know exactly where, right? And I did swim across the river, right? Yeah, amniotic fluid. And it's interesting that one of my first memories that I have, being in Chicago, we lived in a tenement. You guys all know tenements, right? Talk about dense housing, right? Fourth floor, and from my window, from the front window in the living room, after you shoo away the mice and the rats and the roaches and everything else, because that's how tenements were, you could see the construction of what ended up being the University of Illinois at Chicago. And I remember my mom, I was like 4 years old, something like that, my mom talking about, you're going to go to that school someday. Little did we know that university was going to displace the majority of the Mexicans in the neighborhood, right? So the original Mexican settlement in Chicago was destroyed to build the University of Illinois, where I then later on ended up going to school. And here I am all these years later, I'll be 70. People were talking about birthdays. I'll be 70 next month. 50 years of doing this beautiful work. I'm not sure what people are planning for me, but if there's a party, I'll let you guys know. So anyways, all these years later, here I am doing anti-displacement work in one way or another. I ended up changing a lot of what I was going to share today based on what I learned in the first panel. So this is a picture that you all know of Santa Fe. I wanted to talk a little bit briefly about sort of the settlement, because all these things are connected. And as Mexicanos, we always talk in stories and historically, and all that is context, right? Our generations back, our grandparents, great-grandparents, that's all a part of who we are and what we do right now. But you all know Ogapoge, Tewa people were here. When the European settlers came, they actually were brought by Tlaxcaltecas. There's a plaque over by San Miguel Chapel, which Tlaxcaltecas built, that says 250 European families and 5,000 Tlaxcaltecas founded what is now Santa Fe. Most of those European families were actually Basque, not Castilian. And Spain as a country didn't exist at the time. It was a kingdom. Many of the entities and parts of that kingdom are still trying to get their independence, right? The Basque region being one of them. But there were other folks from the Iberian Peninsula along with them. But it's important to know that and to understand that, right? The Mexica culture, Mexican culture, had been here already, even prior to the Tlaxcaltecas coming here. Trade and interconnectedness and relationships already existed going back thousands of years. Matter of fact, the language that the Mexica spoke and continue to speak is related to Navajo. So trade, language, culture, all those connections existed prior to European colonization of the area. Big picture of Santa Fe. The images that Tomás shared earlier were better in terms of, because I was going to do it with a pointer, but in terms of demonstrating where people were and where they are right now, in terms of some of the folks that were here prior to later settlements and later colonizations of Santa Fe. Moving from sort of the brown buildings, the brown people moved from the brown buildings downtown to the mobile home parks, and then the new construction in Tierra Contenta on the south side. South side is another concept I think that at some point we have to get our brains wrapped around. When I first moved here, I was in Albuquerque for a couple of decades before moving up to Santa Fe in 2007. The term Southside was similar to, in use, was used similarly to the way projects were used back in Chicago, right? So it connotated color, class, and places where you didn't want to go. And that's the way Southside had been used. More recently, though, everything's the Southside. And that's confusing, right? So one of the things that we really need to work on is designating, and during the annexation, there was actually some conversation about naming, some of the new neighborhoods, new to the city on the south side. Something that we might want to think about. The focus area of our work at EarthCare, and EarthCare is an environmental justice, community health, and neighborhood development organization now. We see all those things as related, and we see those things as progressions of where we need to be. The focus area there was the area that was annexed into the city. That's the primary focus of our work here in Santa Fe. We also do statewide work through one of our projects called YUCCA, Youth United for Climate Crisis Action. So we're doing work in terms of the climate crisis, the oil and gas, the produced water, all those kind of poisons that they're trying to thrust on the population. We're doing that statewide and even some national work. In terms of our local work, this is the area where the primary focus of our work here in Santa Fe. Back in 2012, myself and Ed Moreno, remember him? Former county commissioner, passed away a few years ago. He and I were contracted to do some work interviewing and getting data and information from the areas of the future annexation areas that had not been a part of conversations until this point. So specifically, they were saying Mayor Acosta and Carmichael Dominguez, City Councilor, asked us, can you talk to folks in the mobile home parks to see what they're thinking, what they're feeling, how they see this whole process here. And we held 40 house meetings and porch meetings during that time. Probably about 500 people participated. We had several community meetings as well. And folks came, and the reports and the information is available somewhere at the city. People have been trying to find it, but I know it's there. But what people said about the annexation was that based on the promises and the conversations that the city was having with folks, they were looking, as was mentioned in the previous panel, they were looking forward to seeing streets paved, sewers connected, better amenities and quality of life kinds of things that the city was talking about, libraries, they were talking about police station, fire station, clinics, all the things that you would expect and that you normally see in sort of the north side of town were the things that people were talking about back then. And this is a closer focus on that same neighborhood. All these years later, we still have 0 parks, 0 clinics, 0 schools. And this was what the city at that point had said. The Phase 2 annexation marks a pivotal moment in Santa Fe's growth by unifying the urban core with high-density suburban corridors. That's what they called us back then. The city ensures long-term economic stability, improved service delivery, and a resilient infrastructure for the next generation of residents. We're still waiting, right? That the area of town, the other day there was an announcement about free bus service. We don't have bus service, right? There's no consistent, accessible bus service on Airport Road. If you live at Riverside Mobile Home Park, which is the last one before you hit 599, you can't get there from there to the shopping area on Zafarano by bus. You can't get from Airport Road to Swan Park by bus. Matter of fact, the buses don't even go to Swan Park because they stop at Jaguar, then you have to walk down a hill, right? So the area that we do most of our work in, and this is the project that we're now, how we're now calling it, focused on the mobile home parks between 599 and Camino Jacobo, the areas that were annexed into the city. Almost 50% of the families with children live in this area. So almost the majority of the city's kids live in this area. The majority, and this is harder to document, but some estimates, right? At least half of the mobile home parks have other families renting from the families that own the mobile home. So we have the highest concentration of people that qualify as homeless based on the criteria living in the mobile home parks. We've got no parks, no recreational activities. There's no clinics, there's no senior centers, there's no libraries. We were always hoping that Mayrah would get the resources to open up some libraries on that side of town. It was the area that was hardest hit by COVID. More deaths, more infections, more long-term. It's the area right across from the Veterans Memorial Highway. On the other side of that is the industrial area. So we get hit with all the asphalt dust, all the what do you call the things that come off the tires, the rubber, the diesel fuel fumes, right? Everything from the highway as well as from the industrial zone hits this area harder than other areas. We have the highest rates of asthma among children. We have the highest rates of hypertension, highest rates of diabetes. I fed all this information now that we have AI. It was the first time I saw AI, I thought there was like a Mexican song, hey, right? We're gonna start singing here. And just to get comfortable, because I'm a low-tech Mexican, just to get comfortable with AI, with ChatGPT, I started calling her Chata, right? So I go, Chata, right? And she goes, good morning, profe, right? I fed characteristics of the mobile home parks into it and said, what other housing framework does this, how would you call, what would you call this? And they said labor camps, right? So it's labor, these are labor camps. These are the folks, city workers can't afford to live here. The workers, though, that that turn it on in the morning, that turn it off at night, they live here. I don't know if you ever saw the movie A Day Without a Mexican, but if something were to happen, right, and these folks were not available to go turn Santa Fe on in the morning, it would be like that movie, right? Because the city, the tourist economy, and all the service industry, the hospitality industry relies on the workers in these. They fixed up Airport Road so people could get to work, right? Not because they needed to, not because of anything else. We have, an airport road is the most dangerous road in the city. It's a highway. The speed limit officially is 45, but people go 55 or 60. It's hard to do economic development work, but because people are flying by, they don't see your signs or whatever. So this is the area where we're working right now, and we're working, doing complementary work to like what Chainbreakers and others are doing, because we're looking at quality of life work. So we've got committees in each of 20-some different neighborhoods now in the area that are working on gathering data around community health, around community assets. So we're doing asset mapping. We're identifying folks with skills, trades, advanced degrees. We're trying to get folks into alternative licensure programs so they could be teachers. We're getting the social workers and seeing if we can't connect them to Southwestern College. We're working with young people to see if we can connect them to community development projects and to take the health data and organize community development efforts around that data. We're doing this all in Spanish. We're going to be certifying community health workers in each of those neighborhoods. And we're also going to be doing, with some support from the Economic Development Office, we're also doing economic development. We're identifying folks that have small businesses or that would like to open up their own businesses and helping them get started. With the support, like I said, of the Economic Development Office, we're going to be offering not just the business classes, but the coaching for the families who have the entrepreneur that they're not going to see for 14 hours a day, right? To be able to support the families of the entrepreneurs so that everybody can benefit. We've got a folklorico project that we're going to try to see if we can do a recreational, cultural work in each of those areas. We'll be doing our own launch with all the data that we're collecting later this summer, early fall. But we really encourage everybody to think about this population differently, because if it wasn't for the folks that are there, the rest of us wouldn't be here. Thank you.
All right. And our next presenter, we switched around order a few times too, so it was a little bit of a surprise for all of us who was going to, I'm sorry? I'm sorry? No, we know we're going to do, I think you're going to be, yeah. We went back and forth a few times on this. So Mayrah Udvardi is an architect, educator, and design director with Mass Design Group. Her work is grounded in a deep commitment to living ecosystems, environmental justice, and architecture's role in equity redefining territory worldwide. Prior to Mass, she worked with Sustainable Native Communities Collaborative on building design and technical capacity in Indian country, with Urban Think Tank on community-led shack upgrading in South Africa, with Global Citizens for Sustainable Development on migrant housing in India, and with Enterprise Community Partners on documenting best practices in affordable housing. She has called Santa Fe her home since 2013 and stewards a 100-year-old adobe with her partner and daughter along Agua Fria Street. So help me to welcome Mayrah Udvardi.
Thanks, Melanie. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all today. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. I'm going to be sharing some reflections not only on the work I'm getting to do with the Hopewell Man community, but also tie that a little bit to some broader reflections I've been having on what it means to belong and thinking about belonging in the context of preserving place. Daniel, I believe, will be speaking after me and will provide a little bit more context on how the Hopewell Man Neighborhood Stabilization Plan came to be. So stay tuned for a little bit more context there. But I wanted to start by acknowledging that I am not from Santa Fe, and so I feel a bit of imposter syndrome talking about preserving a place that I am not from. I have spent all my life migrating from place to place, in some cases because of displacement, in other places because of search for opportunity or search for belonging. And so this kind of shows you a map of all of those migrations over the last 34 years. And I think, one of the things I've really been trying to reflect on is, of all of those places I've been able to call home, what are some of the spatial conditions that really allowed for me or my family or my neighbors to really feel like they could belong. And because I'm an architect, I really think about that at multiple scales. What does it mean within the home? What does it mean within your community? And then how do cities also support that sense of belonging? So a couple reflections I've had over the past year. I was able to take some time off to do a residency to really think about this, which was such a privilege after I had my daughter last year, because otherwise the slog of practice really kind of bogs you down. And I was reflecting on, these three different scales and very high level, some of the commonalities of the places that I felt like were most supportive of people's ability to kind of belong and connect and remain in place were these. So the first is that these neighborhoods or these cities had very distinct neighborhood identities, right? There wasn't this kind of uniform homogeneity across the entire city, but the city was allowing neighborhoods to flourish independently. The second was that these cities were allowing for flexible and mixed-use zoning, right? There weren't a lot of encumbrances to restrict use types, and so it was allowing kind of organic ways of being in place, and that often meant that you had businesses alongside homes, alongside civic and community centers, and so being able to really benefit from all of these resources nearby. And then the third was density, and really thinking about pedestrian-oriented development. At the community or at the neighborhood scale, the things that I really observed that people also shared really helped kind of support their sense of belonging, sense of place, was that even in these very old cities, urban fabric was able to transform, right? Like you weren't just preserving a historic facade for the sake of it, but those buildings were evolving to meet current needs. That there were shared open spaces that had evolved to support a variety of different cultures of uses, right? They're kind of, we talk about white nature with green space, the kind of singular way one's supposed to be able to occupy a park, for example. And that often is an embracive of a lot of different cultures of being able to gather in shared public space. And then that neighborhoods were really thinking about the heart of a place. Where were people convening? And then at the scale of the home, the things I think that really resonated for me and my family were having homes that really allowed us to feel connected to the street, have our eyes on the street, felt like, we were being kind of watched and cared for by our neighbors, but also balancing that with privacy. That we were living in homes that weren't making us sick. I definitely lived in a couple homes with horrible mold and water issues, and that impacts not only your health and kind of long-term outcomes, but also your sense of not feeling like you can really connect to a place. And then that you feel agency in being able to shape your environment, that you have control and agency over how your home evolves, and feel like you can really steward that, not only as an asset, but as a place that you and your family live. So now, after kind of all of those kind of global migrations, I find myself very committed to Santa Fe. My home is along Agua Fria, where you see that here. And for the last 6 years, I've been working out of our Mass Santa Fe office here in the 2nd Street complex in Hopewell, Man, and find myself in this exciting kind of moment where I'm getting to support this very large kind of long-term effort to think about how Hopewell, Man is being supported by the city to remain strong and stable in place as all of these changes happen around it. So this is the boundary for Hopewell, Man that I'm talking about when I talk about the Hopewell, Man Neighborhood Stabilization Plan. So it's bounded on all sides by arterials. So it's very much an islanded neighborhood. We have St. Mike's to the south, we have Cerrillos, and then we have the rail trail. And this is a neighborhood that has been fighting a lot of change for a long time, but it's also gearing up to see a lot of investments around it. There are planned road diets and kind of road restructurings along the arterials bounding it. And then, of course, we have Midtown, which is going to be investing so much into new spaces and economic drivers to the south of it. So one of the things that, really kind of led to, and Daniel's going to talk more about the history of this, that kind of led to this plan was community members' determination that changes around it really needed to be informed by community needs, and that we also needed to think about displacement pressures at the same time. So the city's making this commitment to think about what anti-displacement looks like in this neighborhood, and I'll talk more about that over the next couple minutes. But just as context, this map is looking at area median income and identifies very clearly that Hopewell Man has the lowest socioeconomic or lowest household incomes in the city, comparable to Southside. But it's quite stark relative to the neighborhoods and the census tracts around it. So this is a neighborhood that does not have the same access to resources as other neighborhoods within Midtown and the East Side. And it also has, according to FEMA's risk index, very high social vulnerability, which means that residents face greater risks from environmental hazards, from displacement pressures, from a whole array of potential threats to the neighborhood. So I'm really interested in talking not only about what potential push factors are in this neighborhood, but also pull factors, because I don't think we can talk about stabilization purely in the context of, oh, development's going to come in, that's going to kind of drive costs up, and it's going to push people out. This is a neighborhood that has not seen the same type of investments as other parts of Santa Fe, which impacts quality of life. And you can't just assume that someone is going to be pushed out purely because of rising costs of rent. Of course, that's a major part of it, but also livability, right? So if someone doesn't have access to good mobility or good transit or parks or resources, how can you feel a sense of belonging or want to call that place home? So we're really trying in this planning effort to think not only about push factors and how to solve for those, but also pull factors and thinking about how we can reconcile some of the disinvestment that's happened in this neighborhood over time. So kind of leveraging the same framework of what are some of maybe the preconditions of belonging, I wanted to just flag some of the strengths and challenges that Hopewell Man is dealing with. Hopewell Man very much feels like a distinct neighborhood. When you go through it, it has its own neighborhood identity that's distinct from the East Side and distinct from other parts of Santa Fe. It actually has relatively restrictive zoning and mixed use, which will be addressed in the next round of land use updates, but thinking about how the neighborhood can benefit from zoning code updates to support some of the desired uses and higher and better uses of land in this neighborhood. It has maybe interior to the neighborhood, somewhat decent connectivity, but as I mentioned before, it's islanded by these arterials. It's very much disconnected from surrounding areas. It's a neighborhood fabric that's evolved over time, but it does not have good access to open space. This is a heat map study that was done a few years ago in Santa Fe that shows the areas that are most susceptible to urban heat island effect and climate change, because either it doesn't have good tree cover or good public open space. Neighborhood life is centered around convening sites, but surprisingly not publicly available convening sites. Nonprofits in the neighborhood like Chainbreaker have stepped in as those sites of convening because they haven't been made available by the city to the same extent. And then as a neighborhood, it suffers from a lot of kind of speculative land use, including a lot of low density storage units, things like that, that often make the neighborhood feel unsafe at night. Not a lot of eyes on the street. There's a lot of challenges that people have expressed throughout this process, but also over many years of Chainbreaker's advocacy around housing quality. And then at the same time, too, property owners don't always feel like they have the resources to be able to invest in maintaining their spaces. So the Hopewell Man neighborhood framework really centers around this understanding that we're not just talking about housing and tenure, that we came into this process assuming that was going to be the bulk of this plan, but realized very quickly actually that residents and business owners, community members really wanted to think holistically about what stabilization meant. And that meant we had to talk not only about housing, but also about how we stabilize jobs and businesses and the public realm. So I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the ideas and recommendations that are emerging as we finalize this year-long planning effort. So this is kind of a prototypical residential streetscape in the neighborhood. And then here are some of the ways in which we really see the plan being able to support better housing and tenure stability. So zoning reform and working in dialogue with land use is going to be really key. We need to be investing in tenant protections and housing stabilization policy, in particular to support vulnerable tenants. We also need to be thinking about homeowner stabilization. new homeownership pathways for folks who have been lifelong renters who want to be able to build equity in land, housing rehabilitation and adaptation, small developer and incremental housing support, right? So not just talking about big new housing developments, but thinking, which would be hard in this neighborhood too, because there aren't huge parcels of land available. So thinking about this kind of infill housing model. Transitional housing support will continue to remain a need in this area, and one that a lot of folks are thinking strategically about. Community land trust work, which Chainbreaker is leading, which could either be consolidated in one area or more dispersed. And then affordable housing partnerships and delivery systems. There are a lot of inefficiencies in how that happens across the city and across the county, and a lot of opportunities for different partners to be working better together. I could go into any interested in, we can talk more about those in the Q&A, but for the sake of time, I'll jump here to kind of jobs and businesses strategies that we're elevating in this plan. Some real low-hanging fruit, local business promotion and district identity. Hopewell Man doesn't even appear as a discrete neighborhood with its own identity in the kind of city list or city website for Go Local, so that's an easy thing to amend to start branding and identifying Hopewell Man businesses as coming from a very distinct place. Local hiring and apprenticeship and workforce pathways, and thinking about how we tie to the job growth that's happening in Midtown. Business incubation and entrepreneur support. There's so many residents we heard from in the neighborhood who want to be able to start small businesses either at home or get better access to either short or long-term office space or retail space. Small business stabilization and preservation, but also investment. So could there be a revolving loan fund to support capital and street front improvements for a lot of these commercial buildings that haven't been able to be rehabilitated in a long time? And then, thinking about other, maybe alternative is not the right word, but other models that can really support shared ownership, like cooperatives or places where someone could start their business and eventually move out once it grows to a certain extent. And then community benefit agreements are also part of this too. This may be a long-range plan because obviously if development's not coming in, you can't negotiate a community benefit agreement. So something that may take time. And then finally, thinking about public realm. So here's a kind of prototypical view looking north along Cerrillos. And how could that corridor transform? We're going to be hearing a little bit more from Joe about some ideas there in a few minutes. But this really needs to start with community stewardship and public realm care. The nonprofits, the local businesses, the residents who are kind of stewards and leaders in this community really need to be at the forefront of driving what this looks like. Public art and cultural identity, how do we express that more in our public realm and partner with arts and culture to do that? Investing in existing transportation stops, stormwater and climate resilience infrastructure, greenways and ecological corridors, so thinking about the kind of connective tissue that we could be creating between parks and open space assets. Doing more to make the park, the singular park, Young Park in Hopewell Man, not only more accessible, but more usable by different age groups and different user groups, but also thinking about expanding parks into pocket parks in more vacant parts of the neighborhood. And then internal to the neighborhood, investing in streets and traffic calming and lighting, basic kind of safety measures, as well as thinking about how we stitch this neighborhood back together with the rest of the city through these corridor reworkings. And then, finally, a long-term hope of mine is that we start seeing some of the surface parking that's so prolific across the neighborhood convert more effectively into more community-oriented uses. I wanted to let everybody know that we're having a community-oriented event to celebrate where we're at in the plan and reveal this plan to the community for the first time. It's also going to be a resource fair with a lot of departments and nonprofits. I think we have over 30. I'm looking at Tomás in the back of the room because I think he has the final number. So Mass and Chainbreaker, Santa Fe Indigenous Center, and the Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency is the team that's been leading this work. And we're going to be gathering at Chainbreaker tomorrow for this event. You're all welcome to stop by. I'm happy to share more about the plan in a bit, but also tomorrow if you want to learn more. Thank you.
Yes, good. Daniel's next. Like, surprise. Daniel Hernandez is a real estate developer, planner, and project manager, and the founder of Proyecto. Did I pronounce that correctly? He has an extensive background in affordable housing development, public-private partnerships, large-scale mixed-use development, and urban planning, and applies his skills to manage the development of arts, community, and education facilities. Hernandez worked several years to create and implement the redevelopment plan for Midtown District in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and he is currently a full-time resident of Santa Fe. So help me welcome Daniel Hernandez.
We were trying to figure out who was going to go first and middle and last, and it ended up to be this, but actually I think it's going to work well in the end anyway. It's great to see the work that, Miguel was part of the strategy of creating, or the team that created the Midtown plan. Mayrah picked up where the plan left off and master planning and thinking about all of the neighborhood stabilization strategies for an adjacent neighborhood that had great concern about the work we were doing specifically at the Midtown site, the previous Santa Fe University of Art and Design campus, because of the potential negative effects it would have on already increasing pressures around displacement and, dare I say, gentrification. But out of the master planning effort became a commitment by the city to support and invest in creating a stabilization plan in collaboration with the neighbors, the community at Hopewell Man. So again, I'm Daniel Hernandez. I am a real estate developer and an urban planner, but I've been really lucky in my life to actually have been able to work on projects that meet my passions around city building, which is really thinking about the intersection of everything that includes community development with a particular focus on environmental resiliency and sustainability, as well as social equity and cultural richness, and strengthening those resources that are so important in creating great cities and great neighborhoods. So when I started the Midtown project in 2018, when the university closed its door, I was asked to lead an effort to master plan the site for redevelopment. The reason that the previous mayor was interested in me coming on board was because I was going to bring both an urban design, urban planning, as well as a strong developer focus, so that the plan was flexible enough to be able to attract developers, but not overly prescriptive to scare them away, like, I can never build that, I don't know. So, and as a developer, oftentimes cities had very prescriptive redevelopment plans, and they would end up being shelved, and then the city planning office would have to go back to the drawing board and figure out a different strategy for getting sites redeveloped. So I wanted to enter into the process of creating a very flexible master plan that our developer partners could walk in and propose, and then we can evaluate them to meet the objectives that the community had set for the master plan. We knew going in that everyone loved, and the historic reference was the northeastern part of the city. But we knew also that over the past century, we've heard this, that the city was beginning to grow in a southwesterly direction. And so we began thinking about the Midtown site as this area within the middle of the city, and particularly the campus was located in the very geographic center of the city, which created an opportunity, both from the view of the community, which was like the north and the south, and how it met in the middle, and from a developer perspective, how important it was as an opportunity for investment and the way that we might attract investment to the site. Someone said earlier it takes a village, and it certainly did for this project. The city actually organized itself most effectively under, I helped do that, and I'm proud of the work that I did with them, but to really galvanize the community development department and the offices that were within it to inform what they were working on that would ultimately inform the master plan, as well as the technical aspects of the plan that the Public Works Department brought. I led the team along with Opticos, an urban design and planning firm out of Berkeley, California, as well as Strategic Economics, also out of Berkeley, California. Opticos created the plan, and I felt it was incredibly important to have an urban land economics on the team as well, in order to analyze the impact that it would have on land values, so that as we presented the plan to the city governing body, there was an economic underpinning of the plan. Layered on top of that were the environmental and the social cultural pieces of the plan. This was the most important piece, I think. So the city could support. We provided technical background, also mixed that with politics and the policies that the previous administration was interested in. But to really bring that planning effort down to the ground was with our partners. We called them the Midtown Engagement Partners. They called themselves that. But they had assistance from the School of Architecture, Design, and Planning Assistance Center to help sort of understand how they wanted to plan their neighborhood and provide support for them that ended up in a report that was used that informed the redevelopment plans, both the master plan as well as the community development plan. I'll talk about those in a little while. But without that, without this effort, I don't think that we would have had a unanimous vote and I don't know, just incredible support. I get emotional about it because it was really amazing. Anyway, so they were very effective because they organized community events that we couldn't have done at the city level because they were at people's, like we heard earlier, people's front yards, at the grocery store, big block parties and different things that actually created an opportunity to hear voices that we would, as a government, would have never heard. And at the level and space that they were familiar with in order to get information, but also make commitments that their information was going to be valued. And so that, again, was a turning point in the plan. As sometimes a control freak, I had to let go of a lot. Relying on the community development plan meant that I had to step back and say, I'm willing to listen and I'm willing to understand what's important to you, and I promise to use that in the redevelopment plans. But as a step back, I had to think about the way that I was going to organize that information. Many of you probably understand the triple bottom line analysis, and particularly in development, where you look at the social impacts, the economic impacts, and the environmental impacts. Well, one thing that became really important was the thoughts that people had about culture and preservation of cultural resources, and the resources in a broad sense, meaning communities and people and their histories and their memories of place. So somehow that didn't fit into that triple bottom line. So we created as a team a fourth analysis point, which was culture. Out of that then, we created the plan. So there's a Midtown master plan that is passed by ordinance. It's a regulatory document, and there's requirements within it. It sets the context for where Midtown is, its history. It starts out with the history of the site, and its use is really public uses and civic uses for the past century, really. It looked at the site in terms of the context of climate, culture, and what people really wanted to see and how they wanted to experience the site. So we didn't think of it, like I said early, as overly prescriptive. We thought of it as a community development plan, really, that was then translated into actual urban planning guidelines and requirements. We thought a lot about circulation. We wanted places where people could easily move through the site. And one thing we referenced a lot with the community was how they love the downtown blocks. They're small, they're compact, you can turn. There's different ways that you can get to a final destination. So we made very small block patterns into the plan. Also, the experience of thinking about the land itself and how people might experience that walk, those places, and open spaces, but also making them part of the broader stormwater management system to make the site and the soils more resilient and to actually restore some of that out of respect for the land. We integrated a lot of open spaces along the way, so there's not only requirements for open space on private parcels, but there's a new plaza that will be in the center of the site, small pocket parks, as well as a long linear park along the eastern edge of the site as well. Design for health was also really important. People wanted to see that the design actually allowed for comfortable places along sidewalks and that it prioritized pedestrians and bicycles over cars. We also thought a lot about, which we heard earlier, that Hopewell Man has a specific identity. We wanted an identity for the Midtown site as well. More density, so at the Midtown site you can actually build up to 5 stories. We thought that we were going to get pushback from communities, and actually people would say, We know we argue a lot about density and height, but at Midtown, it makes sense to actually have density and height at Midtown. So Midtown, as it gets developed, will definitely have its own particular unique set of place within the center of the city. So we created, again, a form-based code with community development as the background or the overarching focus, meaning that we just provided land use allowances. So we dictated everything that's allowed to be built at Midtown within the blocks and the parcels that we identified, as well as we dictated street patterns, because we heard it was very important for people to be able to walk around in safe, comfortable environments. So for us, it was about the space between buildings and identifying that and creating those spaces where people would love to be. There are specific requirements for civics, the parks, et cetera, and it's down to the pocket park on individual blocks. So again, now then the buildings that made these rooms in the public realm also have some requirements, but lots of flexibility built within it. As you see on the right, we didn't want to be over stylistic. In fact, we didn't provide style as well, because we knew that communities are always arguing about whether that should be the downtown Santa Fe style or some of the newer styles that are in Midtown, Atlanta, or in the Baca neighborhoods. So we wanted to remain agnostic, but we wanted to provide guidance to the developers. So now then it becomes up to the city, particularly the Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency, to review proposals that developers and architects present. So there are specific requirements, setbacks, heights, the way that it meets the sidewalk, but we did provide guidance by images of good architecture, great architecture that communities thought they would like to see at Midtown. So we included those images of different buildings within it. So again, as proposals are presented by developers to the city, it's up to the city then to respond to whether they are actually meeting the intent as well as the requirements of the Midtown Master Plan. I think the greatest thing that came out of that planning process was an accompanying plan, which was called the Community Development Plan. I remember being at meetings where people would say, look, I don't care if the sidewalk is 4 feet, 7 feet, 10 feet, and walk on it with a stroller. So they didn't necessarily care about curb heights, sidewalk widths, et cetera. They wanted to know who was going to develop it, who was going to be able to live, play, work there, and whether it was for them, the Santa Fe people who participated in the community process, and particularly the Hopewell Man neighbors that came as a powerful force to influence the plan. So again, we divided up the community development plan according to these 4 analysis points, but also strategies within each of those. So there's requirements for certain things like preservation of the existing statues, outdoor sculptures that are there. There's requirements about arts and culture, and particularly around the preservation of certain buildings at the site, which I'll talk about next. But there were absolute requirements within the community development plan, so all plans will be reviewed on how they meet these 4 different aspects of redevelopment of the Midtown site. In fact, there is one specific requirement, which when I was negotiating the film production part of the site that's now open, I was required to analyze the proposal, actually in written document, how it met from an economic perspective of the impacts under each of these categories. The buildings that are going to be preserved, we call them legacy buildings. Garcia Studios, redeveloped, and I hope that you guys have had a chance to visit the new cinema. The Performing Arts Center, the Greer Garson Theater will be redeveloped. The library will be a public library, the Fulkerson Library, and the Midtown Visual Arts Center, which went out for an RFP a few years ago. SFAI, the Santa Fe Art Institute, was selected as a developer. They created a development entity called the Midtown Arts and Design Alliance. Mayrah and I are going to be working with them. We're joining the staff. And as Jamie goes on to some new frontiers at Harvard, but she will continue to be a part of the team. But we're planning on redeveloping that as an arts hub, which was part of what the master plan and the community development said that it would be. So be on the lookout for that. It'll go to the vote for a ground lease and the development plans on June 10th. So we hope for your support at that meeting, the governing body meeting. I'm going to end with something just very provocative, and I'll go as quickly as possible. While the federal government is about to pass some new legislation around community development block grants and some housing funds, the federal government hasn't been involved in community development in decades. And I guess I'm going to challenge the current administration here in Santa Fe a little bit too. The Office of Affordable Housing had been under the Economic Development Office. Now it's under the Land Use Office. I feel like it's a hidden piece of really important piece of government that most major cities around the country have a housing department. I'm proposing that we're being a little naive to think that someone as a director would be under an economic development profession or under urban land use profession when there are professions within the housing development and preservation industry. And I think that that department should have the agency to be able to set policy with communities, that should have the acumen to be able to lead and campaign around more financing for affordable housing in the city. It should be looking at housing as a huge portfolio that includes housing affordability as well as housing access and housing choices. I'm proposing also that we should not be thinking of our land use and construction department as just that, but there actually should be an urban planning and urban design office under which land use and planning sits, neighborhood planning to support the efforts that Mayrah and Miguel are working on, as well as Chainbreakers, so that there's someone there that's providing support and they know where those plans can land and actually get put into policy. Environmental planning, which is really important for a place like Santa Fe. And then also, rather than just construction, how about green building and construction department? So I won't go through the others, but I feel like these are very important moves for the city to make. Thank you. And that we shouldn't be sitting by passive as our administration is not looking at a more comprehensive view that creates plans like the Midtown that was really about community development. And if we've lost the community development part, and that does no longer exist. He took that away. I love the mayor. I'm just being provocative right now, but I think the community development is one of those particular frameworks that we're losing in this country that really brings together a more holistic, integrated approach to the way that city building can happen. So again, I'm being provocative in that last piece, make art, not war, as a way to think about pushing some of these agenda items forward that you heard today. Thank you.
There he is with his talk. You forgot you put that one in there, huh? And then our last speaker for the panel, and we'll get there when we get there, is Joe Simmons, who's our moderator for today too. Joe is a licensed architect. He founded Blue Sky Studio in 1984 and remains active in the profession. He is an expert in historic preservation, having completed dozens of projects in New Mexico, Colorado, Iowa, Arizona, California, Utah, and Texas, and an expert with the building, land use, and preservation codes. Simmons is a member of the Santa Fe chapter of the American Institute of Architects and is a member of the Technical Advisory Working Group for Phase 1 of the Santa Fe Land Use Rewrite. And recently, he was appointed as the licensed architect on Santa Fe Historic District's Design Review Board. So help me welcome Joe Simmons.
Thank you, everybody. It's great to be up here. It's been quite a while since I've spoken with a big audience like this, so I'm always nervous. So I was born and raised in Albuquerque. My father was an engineer and a contractor. My mother was an award-winning artist. And one of my very earliest memories of driving into Cerrillos Road was when I was 11 years old. We were coming down. My mother won a first place award at the New Mexico Biennial. And I have this vivid memory of driving by the El Rey. project, and I must have mentioned something to my mom about it, and then she told me that, well, Santa Fe has an ordinance where all the buildings have to have this southwestern style to it. And it kind of settled with me, but here I am, 60 years later, and I'm on the board, and I'm helping to adjudicate the laws. So, about 12 years ago, my wife and I went to Barcelona and had this crazy notion that we might want to retire there. And I started to, in earnest, learn Spanish, and we were kind of working it through, but I was starting to get dealing with the realities of living abroad and kids and grandkids. And then one Labor Day weekend, couple years later, we were down here on a chili run. I was living in Denver at the time. I should back up a little bit. I graduated from UNM in 1974. I went and traveled in Europe for a year, came back and worked for a couple years, and realized that my ambitions to do high-rise buildings were probably not going to get supported here in New Mexico. So I grabbed my skis and my MGB and I drove to Denver, and where I had a career there until 5 years ago. I still have my major practice is still there, but about 7 years ago, we were down here, like I said, on a chili run, and my wife happened to mention that, you know, if this Spain thing doesn't work out, I could sure live here, which kind of pricked up my interest. And then it was a year later that I was actually doing a development project in Denver that we were down here again, and I just out of curiosity happened to get onto Zillow and look at real estate values and found a piece of property in the Guadalupe neighborhood where we now have a house and a couple of rentals. And so I've been through the process with the H-board on that. I've been through all that. So when we got here, I started to look around, and I noticed Cerrillos Road was always kind of my road. So I would always get off I-25 at the south end and come into town, even if I was going skiing instead of coming around. But I started to realize just kind of how tired and shabby that Cerrillos is. And then I started to kind of get the idea about how unsafe it is. And then it was a little over a year ago that I attended a little seminar with the Friends of Architecture, and I got inspired to kind of put my own thoughts and ideas down on how to redevelop that part of the road that I've spent my entire career in Denver doing historic preservation and redevelopment. And I just thought, well, let me get my ideas down on a piece of paper. And so as part of that, I put a poster together, and then Melanie attended that open house and then asked me if I could bring the poster down for the show that they have at El Zaguan, and one thing led to another, and then she has invited me to the panel and invited me to speak, so I'm going to quickly run through some slides here about this presentation I did. It's just basically some ideas. Okay, so I think this works. Okay, great. So so this is the study area. It starts at St. Francis and it ends at Richards. And now it's not to say that it can't extend further down or further up, but it's kind of just where I just set my focus. So let me see if I can get this. Okay, great. So there's 3 areas of focus, 3 areas of need. There's pedestrian safety. We certainly need new and more housing types, and then some more formal public recreation areas. And then the 3 courses of action is, one is to reduce the speed along Cerrillos Road, especially past St. Michael's, where it expands into 6 lanes each way plus turning lanes. And as was mentioned earlier, Miguel mentioned this on Airport Road, when the speed limit is 45 miles an hour. I've been told that the cops in New Mexico won't stop you for less than 10 over. So that's freeway speeds. And so no wonder Cerrillos is a very unsafe street. As being part of the general, the land use code update, I think we need a general plan update to provide a framework for thriving urban pedestrian experience, which is tremendously lacking along Cerrillos. And then to redevelop the vacant and obsolete big box retails And then a few things that we need to do is to disallow surface parking adjacent to the street, and then to help sunset some incompatible uses like storage warehouses, used car lots, landscape materials, and stuff like that. So this is a current land use map from the city. So here's the intersection of St. Francis and Cerrillos, and then that is Richards. And you can see this red zone is commercial mixed use, which is a very catch-all zone class, and it is prevalent all the way down Cerrillos. But what is interesting about this is flanking, let me say a little more about this. The C2 zoning allows 4-story buildings, 45-foot heights, and I know that there's quite an effort in this town that high-rise buildings, but here we are. But what's interesting is that on either side of Cerrillos, all the way down, is low-density housing. So it goes from an allowable 4-story limit to typically 1 to 2 stories. So I just included that just to kind of give some context. Then, so the plan that I had developed here was just to look at how to redevelop some areas into some more mixed use. And it's not changing any zoning, but it's showing where there could be some redevelopment of some higher density housing, and then not so high density housing. So I'm proposing that, like in these areas with the blue, there would be like 3 to 5 stories, where these would be 2 to 3 stories. And at this block right here is really fascinating to me because the buildings come right up to the street. Cars come right off the street. There's a continuous curb cut. There are no curb cuts. And so when people park, they have to actually back out onto a state highway. So we're going to talk about a traffic solution here. We're going to talk about some community here, some parks. Here's the Midtown. I want to connect this to Cerrillos. I know there was a lot of conversation when this was going on here, but with the Smiths leaving there and everybody starting to understand that the big box business model is sort of kind of dead, that we have some opportunities. And then as we get down to the very end, how to replicate what's happened in the Baca neighborhood here down in the neighborhood down to where Meow Wolf is. So, oops. So my colleague Richard Martinez has an idea about how to alleviate some traffic congestion at this terrible intersection. You know that the safety issues along Cerrillos Road are actually by design. In 1960, it was somehow concluded that we needed to connect I-25 with Highway 84 and connect this at an acute angle where the historic Route 66 occurred. And then to complicate it, then they ran a rail line in the tightest part of the intersection. And so while this is a hugely ambitious project of doing a roundabout, it's not out of the realm of possibility that you could actually underground or put St. Francis below grade. It creates some problems with accessing Cerrillos onto St. Francis, but that can be alleviated by just right up here, just diverting that traffic this way. So that's just one of the ideas here. Then when I was in high school, we made a trip from Albuquerque up to the Institute of American Indian Arts when the Solari Amphitheater had just been completed, and it just stunned me as to what an amazing piece of architecture that was. Now, I'm not sure that the tribes are interested in restoring this. I know there's been a lot of conversation about that, but that would be a wonderful thing to do. But what we could do, and I think it's been some conversation about having a community amphitheater, that this is a brownfield site that P&M owns. Ostensibly just has some PCPs and just some other things that can be remediated, but I was just suggesting in this notion here that that would be a good location for an amphitheater. Just an idea. The New Mexico DOT and Santa Fe Public Works has been working on several design proposals for how to redevelop just the road bed between, I think it's between 2nd Street and St. Francis, where there is currently hardly, there's many places where there's not even any sidewalks, and where I mentioned that cars are backing out. So this is just one of the notions that they're trying to do, is to separate bicycle traffic from pedestrian traffic, and then what's glaringly missing here is any kind of a public transit way in the middle here. But so this is just some of their proposals to realign Cerrillos. And so my proposal, my suggestion, my recommendation would be, let's just make Cerrillos Road 2 lanes each way, all the way down, that we do not need to have freeway speeds in an urban neighborhood. Then another notion here is all of these wonderful old Route 66 hotels here. These uses can be maintained and restored. I mean, what's happened at El Reyes is incredible. It's a large enough hotel that they were able to redevelop that and make money, but I think that there's some other, many of these other motor courts that could certainly use some help. And a suggestion or a notion that I had would be to somehow create some sort of a historic neighborhood or historic uses there that would allow them to then access investment tax credits for renovation and rehab and stuff like that. Then, I know I want to gotta hurry up. As I mentioned here, I know that in the Midtown plan, there was a lot of conversation about trying to connect to Cerrillos Road, and without me being prejudiced about or influenced by inertia and economics and stuff like that, but taking advantage of the fact that the Smiths is no longer there, the idea is to create a second plaza, big outdoor space. If anybody's been to Barcelona, you know the Rambla there. It's just incredible. And I think that that would be just a wonderful way to kind of help connect the Midtown with Cerrillos, with the idea that you make a promenade and a very, very pronounced public space for there. And then, oops, moving down. Sorry. So I ripped this out of the Denver zoning code. This is their form-based codes about how you transition from a high density down to a low density. And I just think that that's, especially as we get along the area that abuts the Hopewell neighborhood, that would be a perfect example of why we would want to do that. And then lastly, the success of the Baca Rail Yard has been so great that we have an amazing opportunity in this neighborhood here to expand that those kind of uses. There's areas filled with these, I call them loose fit buildings that can be easily renovated, easily accommodated for all sorts of live, work, maker spaces, stuff like that. So that's basically my ideas.
But we're actually going to go into public questions now. Everyone's presentations were so great and lengthy and full of information. So I think Story's here and Pam. And so we'll pass those around. We got about 10 minutes or so for questions. We did start a few minutes late. And if anybody, I think look on your schedule too. I think we're starting back at like 1:10, 1:15 or something after the lunch break. So we'll do about 10 minutes of questions. So go ahead and start.
Hello? I want to thank everybody for your presentation and your comments. I'm going to open up with just some comments and pose some questions to you all that may not be able to be answered here today. But starting with the last presentation, the view of Cerrillos Road and the potentials there, I certainly appreciate that. I feel, though, that Santa Fe has lost some opportunities already in terms of some of those historic hotels. We had, if everybody remembers, I think it was the Wagon Wheel Hotel was there through a series of issues there. The property then was sold, and what we have there now is a car wash. The car wash does look lovely with the landscaping, but I open the question with, is that what Santa Fe needs? Is that what Santa Fe wants? The second part of that stretch is we have the Empire building. I think they have attempted to put something there, but now I think the latest proposal is going to be a storage facility. So in looking at the list, Mr. Simmons, that you put up first is maybe storage isn't what we're looking for there. So I put this out there because what I don't hear is some earlier conversations or higher level conversations about what is it that Santa Fe needs and what is it that Santa Fe wants.
When my son was 3 years old, he said, "Dad, I need some gum." So need and want, that's a fun thing. So certainly Santa Fe needs housing. It's a mystery to me how the ENN process quashed the Empire project, because it was 4 stories and there was just this point of view that that was not appropriate. And yet 6 months later, they come back and the neighbors approved a 2-story storage warehouse. So I'm not sure that what people want is aligned with what Santa Fe needs. And I don't know how to reconcile that.
Can I jump in there too?
Sure.
It's been interesting hearing a variety of different community perspectives in response to your question around the Hopewell Man neighborhood stabilization planning process. And I think it's a good reminder for us that communities are not monolithic in our opinions about what's needed. People have a different sense of needs, and often those contradict. So, like, we've heard multiple times throughout this planning process the need for more housing. We've also heard a mixture of concern around density, even density along a corridor like the project that was mentioned. And from those same voices, we often hear this concern around safety and the sense that there aren't eyes on the street when you're instead choosing the land use that like generates these like low density storage facilities that are like dark and creepy at night and make people afraid to like walk in their neighborhood. So I think there's often kind of, I don't think we're always aware of the kind of conflicts in our own sentiments about what we think we need, but also how sometimes what seems like the lesser of those evils ends up creating or contributing to some of the problems we also are facing in our neighborhoods.
My experience too, during the Midtown planning process is that people have a fairly clear idea about what they want to see in their city, and they just haven't had, for whatever reason, there hasn't been necessarily the zoning and land use process to actually get the kind of buildings and development people want to see in their city. So we started with the Link overlay corridor in the Midtown area, which allowed for a mix of uses and really incentivize mixed use with residential. Stuff that people were clear about that they wanted to see. And what that did, it also provides a avenue for them to go down that their review process and their approvals process would be expedited. Now, whether that's working or not, is still to be determined, but we used that, and people actually had really positive responses to the kind of uses that would be allowed under that link and what was incentivized for the type of development we want to see. The problem is that we all know that the approvals process has been really not expeditious for even the kind of projects we want to see. That costs money, developers get disincentivized, and then we don't see the kind of development we want to see along these corridors. So I think it's a great question for Heather Lamboy, that will be speaking later this afternoon, because she's updating the code. And what my understanding is that link overlay corridor, link overlay was actually used as a way to think about other corridors besides the Midtown area in the city. So it'd be a great question for Heather too.
But I think one of the other challenges, though, is deeper. And in your presentation around community and community development and all that, it's inferred, but it wasn't explicit, and I think it needs to be. And of community, not just how do you do community development, but a sense of community. When we talk we usually mean me, right? And we've created, especially amongst populations that have moved here, the last sort of waves of folks that have moved here, the invitation is come here and do what you want, right? And don't worry about anybody else, right? This is a place where you can be you and do the art you want, do the development you want, do whatever it is. This is a place to be different, right? And do your thing. So the sense of collective good, of the common good, is missing, right? It's what built and held this community for so long. Among the Chicano population, for example, and native populations here, that's the key, right? And that's missing now. And plus, it's a contested town, and we don't talk about that, right? The space is contested. Folks that work here don't trust the newcomers. Newcomers see, the folks that work here as like backward, and they just don't like progress, and they just say no to everything. They couldn't even take care of their brown buildings. That's why we need to take care of them for them. So there's this whole community building process that nobody wants to invest in. When you ask foundations for money for community building, for organizing, for capacity building, they're like, but what's the outcome, right? Where's the benefit? And I think that's the biggest benefit, is relationship building. The neighborhood planning office will be great, but we need neighborhood organizing. The examples, the work that we did in Midtown could not have happened had it not been for the work that Chainbreaker did in building community to get to that point, right? Because people were there with having had the experience, the capacity of building an idea about the common good and the commonwealth for a helpful man. It wasn't a bunch of folks just showing up and saying, how do I take care of my house or my interests or my needs? Right?
Other questions?
Yeah. I'm delighted that you're concerned about the Baca neighborhood and the 17 acres that P&M still owns. The Baca neighborhood in the whole west side in the 1990s was united. It was vital. And there was a neighborhood newsletter, West Side newsletter called Puntos de Vista, which has since been digitized and indexed in the U&M archives. I highly recommend it. It was with our fight with P&M over first the contaminated well and then a power line going through the neighborhood. That spirit needs to be revived. At the beginning of COVID, we convened a nonprofit to make an offer to P&M to accept a donation of that 17 acres, which was a power plant actually at one point, and the service center for a brownfields treatment and master planning like the rail yard. That P&M had gotten many, many offers for that land. It's highly valuable. That offer has not been accepted. They said, well, wait until there's remediation. That hasn't happened. But the reality is, if Blackstone or whatever buys P&M, then that opportunity is going to be lost. Do you have any comment on that?
I wish I knew more about that, and I sort of would take an opposite point of view about if Blackstone does buy P&M, they're probably going to want to shed that property.
Exactly. Yes, they'll sell it right away to the highest bidder. And engaging with PNM now is important. The remediation of the Baca Street well hasn't been determined, but there is other contamination, and it needs to be dealt with. And better that a public utility be owned by the public. Thank you.
You buy it, Joe. Yeah, right.
I think we could take one quick question, and then we have to wrap up so everyone can take a lunch break. Does anyone have a quick question? I think there's one hand back here. Brief. Brevity.
Hi. Yes, very brief. I'm Heather Lamboy. Public service announcement. The storage has not, I'm not supposed to be doing this, but is on the agenda this coming Thursday for the Planning Commission. And I want people to get out and speak about it. I had to sign off on a staff report that I hated because it complies with the law. In Denver, when I was working in Aurora, we had transit-oriented development plans that were incredibly powerful. And I can see that happening with the neighborhood stabilization plan. We don't have that to hang our hat on yet, but a lot of the things that are discussed in there truly, truly could help move the needle away from something like self-storage. So,
Yay.
6 o'clock,
Thanks, Heather.
Thursday, hope to see you.
And for all of you, we're going to take a lunch break. Heather will be our final presenter, so she'll do a presentation, and then we'll open it up for more discussion. There'll be more time for discussion at that point, a little more of a forum. And we have the lunch break, so if you'd come back here at 1:10 and just join us. We'd love to have you back. Thanks so much.
Yeah.